We'll be starting here in about 2 minutes. So if everyone could start making their way towards their seats, please. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Today is August 31st, 2023. This is a special session of your Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. Welcome. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that we have individuals participating remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should please mute your phone at the time, especially when you're speaking. And this is done so you can avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name if you're asked to do so, and title every time you speak, so the public that is participating knows exactly who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and its current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General's office. While speaking, please make sure that you speak clearly and directly into the microphone at an audible level where you can be heard so it can be captured by our clerk. I will now call this meeting to order. Clerk will call and please announce the meeting as well.
Good evening. You are hereby notified that I have called a special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, to be conducted in a hybrid format on Thursday, August 31st, 2023, at 5 p.m. in the Commission chambers located on the lobby level of the Municipal Office Building for a presentation regarding the Quindaro ruins. Roll call. Markley? Here. Stites, we have an absence memo. Davis?
Here.
Bynum? Here. Burrows?
Here.
Townsend? Here. McKiernan? Ramirez? Johnson?
Here.
Kane, we have an absence memo. Garner?
Here. Thank you, clerk. This evening, we're going to have a presentation regarding the Quindaro ruins. This is a real important meeting for our community. There's been talk for decades about moving the Quindaro ruins from ruin into something really exceptionally great, not just for Wyandotte County and the state of Kansas, but for our entire nation. When you talk about the abolitionists, the Wyandotte Indians, as well as other freed slaves that used the Underground Railroad to come to the free state of Kansas by way of the Quindaro ruins, that is a significant site. One of the most recognized and significant sites for the Underground Railroad anywhere you can find in this nation. It is a valuable resource as well as jewel for Wyandotte County. So tonight we're going to discuss and kick off a conversation. And part of this conversation, I want people to always remember, even though we're starting the discussion tonight, the ultimate goal and the vision is for all of us to work together, our staff here at the Unified Government, our Unified Government commissioners, as well as the people that call Wyandotte County home, to really reimagine and vision something great for the Quindaro ruins, to make it a first-class tourist attraction. The vision of having people from all over the world come to that location to educate themselves and to learn about the plight of freed slaves that came through Quindaro for freedom to the free state of Kansas by way of the Underground Railroad. It is a site that needs to be stabilized. There's still artifacts there. There's a lot of history that emanates from that location, the Quindaro ruins, that goes into the northeast area of Kansas City, Kansas. And it could be, if it's done right, a positive economic driver for an area that has too long been disinvested, disenfranchised, and redlined intentionally over decades here in Kansas City, Kansas. And so part of this presentation is to look at the Quindaro ruins, and hopefully you all can start imagining and reimagining what a positive vision for the Northeast and especially for the Quindaro ruins can be when you talk about revitalization, stabilization, and something to where it effectively and essentially be the jewel, not for just Wyandotte County and the great state of Kansas, but for the entire nation. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Lavert Murray, who's my economic development advisor, who's been involved over the years with the Quindaro ruins in a variety of capacities, and he's going to lead tonight's conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Tyrone Garner, members of the Unified Government Commission, Mr. David Johnson, our county administrator. This evening, we wish to set the stage for meaningful dialogue and discussion about an area that is dear and deep in the heart of many throughout our community and beyond. We are hopeful that through these discussions, we can establish a reset and a reboot for the Quindaro ruin and the Quindaro ruin archaeological park initiative. There are a number of documentaries tracing the history of Quindaro, and later, not tonight, we hope to share with you all of those documentaries. However, tonight we will call upon Mr. Mark Meisenheimer to show his documentary as part of the preamble of things to come. Mr. Meisenheimer recently showed his film in Washington, D.C. Immediately following, I will share the vision for Quindaro and have some brief discussion and introduce you to some of our stakeholders who will have comments as well. And I want to make sure we acknowledge our chief of the Wyandotte Nation of Kansas, who is with us today. Forgive me, I don't want to butcher the name, Chief Judith Trunyak Menthe. And thank you. And second chief. Right. Kristen Zane. And I do know that Holly Zane would be with us tonight, but she is ill. And so we appreciate her thinking about us. And we have Chief Justice Karen Arnold Berger, who's vitally involved in the Quindaro ruins, Chief Justice of the Kansas Supreme Court. Can't, yeah. That's my job. And we have a number of dignitaries and stakeholders from Quindaro, and we'll get into introductions after the showing of the film and hear comments as well. Mr. Meisenheimer.
Thank you, Lavert. I'll keep this short. I just wanted to thank you all, the unified government and the mayor, for the invitation and opportunity to screen the documentary film tonight. It's a great honor to be included in the conversation about the significant historic site as it gains the recognition it much deserves. Quindaro Ruins, a documentary film, was recently showcased at the 15th Film Festival in Washington, D.C. Over the Juneteenth holiday. And shortly afterwards, the National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom Film Festival. And just this week, due to our appearance at the Kansas City Film Fest International, an environmental group learned about the film and is giving consideration to screening it at their festival that focuses on the issues and history surrounding the Missouri River. Our goal has never been to make money, but rather to generate awareness, inspire dialogue, and provoke positive change. The film is a result of countless hours, sleepless nights, and unwavering determination, all fueled by the desire to contribute meaningfully to the recognition and preservation of the historic site, Quindaro. Thank you.
"97 years, 1 month and 13 days, people have tried to get historic preservation and to secure the site. And because of our Congressman Yoder, we're here today. I have other written testimony here, but I am unable to continue reading because I'm just so caught up in the moment. And it is just the Kansas State Supreme Court had given full carte blanche for the toxic waste dump to come forward at Quindaro, and I instantly saw red. Like if you land down at the beach and you have your eyes closed and just pure red, and then it just turned into fire. And I made the statement that these people had just crossed over into hell.
Look, we shouldn't shy away from the S word, slavery. It is a part of the history, albeit ugly, of our nation.
This film has been so personal to me because the memory of my dad motivated me to make this film. I lost him just a few years ago.
Your concern and all the things you do for us. Sure helped us all.
And that message that you heard, that's one of the last times I heard my dad speak. And I think about the impact that my dad had on me in regards to making the learning of history such an impactful thing in my life, as he is a former history teacher.
I don't know that we can keep expecting to have people, you know, fall on their sword for the Quindaro ruins. We can't be our own worst enemies. Off the record for a second.
Property was a big deal. Once you've been property, to actually have property is a big deal. And we were only like third generation out of slavery, you know, in Quindaro.
Quindaro is absolutely a beautiful place alongside the river, right across from Parkville, Missouri. The slaves would come most of the time, walk across the ice.
This is where my great-great-grandfather, Robert Monroe, buried the slave. He was the one that really the reason why I'm here today. Brought my family over from Clay County, Missouri, and to freedom.
Even if you had papers that said you were a freedman, you could still be taken by snatchers. And that's what happened in Quindaro. During the day, you'd have snatchers from Missouri on the hill above the community, waiting for someone alone who was African-American to walk in and be taken. And not only was it a felony to interfere with someone taking a slave back, but if you didn't help them in taking a slave, you also could be charged with a felony.
The Indians set up an area in the old Quindaro Cemetery called the Signal Tree. And they were able to alert the slaves as to where the bounty hunters were located. And they wouldn't move the slaves until the bounty hunters moved.
You might have a material or something hanging on it, or that tree dates back, it's real old.
The first house that an escaped slave would come to was that Wyandotte House Hotel, which is my great-grandfather's establishment. He'd hide them in the basement and also the cistern. He would then, along with members of our tribe, move them through the Indian trails up through our reservations in Ohio, Michigan, and finally to Toronto.
This is the old Quindaro Brewery. This dates back to 1850. This is where they kept the wine and beer cold in the cellar. It stays cool there year round. This is where the slaves also hid. This was all one upstanding building. The community college come here and put up that structure to help stabilize it. This building is very old. You see the mortar on the rock there. You can't find that at Home Depot or Lowe's. They use the sand in the river to help.
But they were always afraid to come because they were told by their slave masters and other that we were savages. and don't go over there because you will be killed or slaughtered and all the negative things that would happen. Well, when they came across and we would greet them, and they were afraid, we would tell them, you're people of the earth, and we would welcome them, and they were one of the family. That's just who the Wyandotte were and the native culture in and of itself.
See, and I don't know that there is such a thing. I mean, I know that in reading the stories that people, the old people who experienced that told, they said here, the signal was to tie a cloth on a tree. It did not say quilt. Well, one of the things that everybody had to have was a bedroll. A bedroll is a quilt that's rolled up and put on the back of your saddle. That was a commodity. And I can't see people in this area selling, using quilts that way. You use them, our family used them to keep warm. That's what we did. We made them. That's how I learned. You will do this because you will need this in the winter. You will be happy to have this in the winter. It's true. You get some cold winters here. One of the natives brought a woman named Dorcas. She was the first Black woman that was listed as being in the territory. And all of the Indians, other Indians, were up in arms about the prospect of having a slave among them. So they started helping people to cross the river and hide in the caves. There were caves right along the river where people would hide until it was safe to come out. And the symbol for the safety was to tie a piece of cloth on the tree. Then they could go down the road called Happy Hollow and be free.
Well, this whole block should be full of business. This right behind you was a business. Right here we used to be LA Furniture. Then across the street was a subsidiary of LA Furniture. We had barbershops, had grocery stores, all kind of business up and down Quindaro.
I believe that this neighborhood has life-sustaining issues here. We have no grocery store in the first district, so no fresh fruits. That means there's a health issue here. Our Parks and Recreation basically has been closed down for 2 years. They've taken the money and spent it elsewhere.
It looks like a nuclear bomb has gone off. You're not going to get folks coming into the community to be educated about Quindaro unless you also lift up the community around there. So it's a safe and healthy community too.
The other big concern right now is there's a lot of illegal dumping going on, not only at the ruins, but just in the area in general. So if you're thinking about the Quindaro ruins as a destination, do you want to go to a destination where it appears that it's unkept, that it's not clean, that it's not safe? That's not where people want to go. So we have to be thinking out past the Quindaro ruins and what does the community look like as you enter the ruins?
That's why I'm grateful for Gary being down there. It's the only place you can pretty much eat. I'm hoping that every one of these vacant buildings, I'm hoping that the people that own them or that's in position will take on a heart like me. I had been a barber in my home for many years. And I had a challenge to find a building because people, they would just let it go down before they would sell.
Well, a whole lot of it happened like when the crack cocaine era came in, it ran a lot of people out. If I'm the only business here, it's just like being a watering hole in the middle of the desert. People gonna come because you still have thousands of houses around you.
There's not very many people left from the community. That's another thing that really messed up when they built 635 through here. And, I don't know, I've heard different things, but I think they could have went a different direction because even took off Quindaro Park. We used to play baseball up there all the time. And they even shaved off part of that. And I don't know, because it was Black community, I kind of think they just said, we'll just go through there. I would just say it kind of isolated Quindaro.
My family was displaced by one of those highways, Highway 71 that runs through Kansas City, Missouri. I remember when I was a young boy, my mom telling me, oh, we used to live right about there, but you don't quite know it anymore because it's just highway land.
Talked to a couple of people who were working with Mayor Gardner and trying to make that revitalized. A lot of things people are talking now, even the swimming pool down here, they're talking about, redoing some things and making things better in this area.
I see the Quindaro ruins potential as being something that could really provide for a resurgent Wyandotte County, especially in an area that at least here lately has been disinvested and disenfranchised. When you look at Wyandotte County in general over the years.
And even with the ruins, it's all kind of politicians getting to make all kind of promises about what's going to happen. You're going to build new stores, going to get new buildings up here, redevelop housing and all that. And the Quindaro ruins, you're going to put it back together and put money there, and it don't never seem to happen. Even when it looks gloomy, we're hopeful and we push it, try to make it better. I know myself, I don't care what the gloom look like. I'm always trying to push forward.
I think the initial motivation for the film, first stemmed from a personal relationship, a friendship that I have. And the two of us would often go to lunch and talk about social reform, issues of the day.
This has a sort of, slightly unkempt feel, to say the least.
So when, the incident surrounding George Floyd happened, we took a hard look at ourselves and ask ourselves, how can we help?
This is where it really happened. Down there is where, the slaves would come from Missouri over to the free state of Kansas and come up this hill. Quindaro was on this hill.
I think the Underground Railroad is an important topic because it's centered around 19th century American history. That history is still impacting us today. There is a literal and metaphorical space that's evolving. And again, that's impacting us today. So how could we impact that?
It wasn't that the members didn't care. We had lots of support from the people in the pews, but it was the hierarchy, there's something else when it comes to the bishops and the pastors.
But I was incensed when I found out that the AME church, I had grown up in the AME, I was baptized in the AME church, had gotten with the city of Kansas City, Kansas, and they had contracted with this second largest trash company in the world to put a landfill on the old town of Quindaro where I grew up.
And they were getting money from BFI. They'd been getting like $6,000 a month, I think, and nobody even knew about it. And when we finally found out, we didn't want no landfill out here because, we didn't want them big garbage trucks and stuff running up and down the streets.
Now, I have not seen documents that showed where people signed their names on things. But, the scuttle in the neighborhoods are like, yeah, those AMEs just wanted some money and somebody came along with a big check and said here, but they had to go through the city in order to get the money. So that's what they did.
In late 1982, the city sent letters to people in this area stating that there was a plan for a landfill here. Even though the excavations were not complete, they decided that they would proceed with the landfill.
They were approved a permit for a landfill. And we formed a group called the Concerned Citizens for Old Quindaro, and we filed a lawsuit. And we made them do a historical study on the area. And we had some guys come in from K-State and National Geographic, and they surveyed the area below this overlook, and they found out that there was a town of Old Quindaro, which dated back to 1850, and they called it the Pompeii of Kansas.
And hundreds of people started coming and setting up tents over here and camping out. And well, needless to say, this was a volatile situation. And we wanted it to be peaceful, but we were prepared to sit down in front of bulldozers.
And I said to city council, you can do this if you want to. You can, it's the only way that you're going to do this is over my dead body. I meant that, over my dead body. And if you kill me, I'll come back and kick your ass. I said that. And I meant it.
Most of the homes and buildings are gone because we were threatened by a landfill, sanitary landfill by Brown and Ferris Industry. And they tore down a lot of the important places of the area, thinking they were going to get a landfill here.
But if they would have put that landfill down there, well, the water intakes for the city were right down there, and people didn't want that water to be going in there drinking water.
And at the time, Johnson County District Number 1 was buying water from BPU. So like that area was supplying water to the whole area at that time. And you get people who don't care about, tons of poison being dumped in one. Oh, they were going to put it in a plastic bag. That's what they said. Oh, we're going to put it in a plastic bag. Yeah, but what are you putting in the plastic bag?
Because they had all the approval from all the governmental entities to put the toxic waste on. They were even going to take and put an overpass going over 635 so the trucks can come in and out, because we were raising sand about the toxic waste coming right by the elementary school and right by Northwest Middle School, Quindaro Elementary, and then Northwest. It was 440 inbound, outbound trucks per day.
Of course, the community rose up in anger and frustration and got the unified government to block the establishment of that landfill. And it gave renewed energy at that time. That's why the overlook was built and some other things after the fact. None of that was there before this process occurred.
Once you've been property, to actually have property is a big deal. And we were only like third generation out of slavery, in Quindaro. So when you own property and you wanted property to so-called be taken care of, you gave it to the church. That's how they got all that property.
Yeah, well, I was leaving office, right as we were moving this bill through Congress, and we'd gotten very close to getting it passed, but we weren't quite there. That is why I've introduced HR 5613, the Quindaro Townsite National Historic Landmark Act. And it really was one of those moments where you have, Marvin, from there in Kansas City, who has sort of lived and breathed this neighborhood, this community his whole life, in the halls of Congress, talking about it to Democrats and Republicans on this committee.
The chair now recognizes Mr. Marvin Robinson for his testimony.
Wow. So I'm sitting up there and, I'm dressed to, I'm the funeral suit for my father. This is indeed one of the most humbling moments and experiences of my entire life. It's just overwhelming, actually. And I feel like had been popped inside C-SPAN or CNN And I started seeing people that had left. Their images started coming into the room, and they and I couldn't even. I have other written testimony here, but I am unable to continue reading because I'm just so caught up in the moment, and it is just. I said, do whatever you all need to. I'm unable to finish and complete. So whatever you want to do, because I don't want to cry.
Mr. Robinson, you might tell the committee, what's the community like today?
Then the Congress people started bouncing back and forth with communications, and then Kevin Yoder, you know, I was able to recompose myself, but they came.
But we weren't able to get the bill completely passed at the end of that year, but it was teed up to go. And so, of course, we supported my successor, Representative Davids, and her team to carry the baton forward.
I took a lot of the work that he had been doing and that had been going on for a long time. And we just kind of, you know, it's almost like a relay race. And, you know, we were that last leg.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Kansas seek recognition?
If you watch the House floor on C-SPAN, you can see, you know, where the speaker sits and the clerks. And I didn't know this until I got there. I walked down and I actually handed a clerk the bill.
Quindaro is an important part of United States and Kansas history.
Sharice Davids immediately jumped on board, even though she was from the opposite party. She defeated Yoder. She supported this legislation. And that led Senator Roberts to work, as the Senate was considering, helping bundle together a variety of actions.
I'd also like to thank Senator Pat Roberts for his leadership on this important issue.
It took absolutely no convincing for Senator Roberts to become involved because once he understood that, you know, it did have the history that it had, he was completely on board.
This task, you would think it'd be a difficult one. Actually, it went just very smoothly. And that's because of you.
You know, from Quindaro to Congress, this message is getting around the nation so we can see our work. And it's just one of those rewarding feelings that what we're doing actually is echoing through the halls of Congress.
It's just like an amazing thing to get the chance to be a part of, a small part of something that's been going on for so long.
While they were screaming about impeachment and how much money goes to a wall and all this stuff that was up here, this work and discussion was going on underneath, but with staffs from these various elected office holders, working with the committees and everything, all to, can we slide this in to this larger bill? And guess what? They did.
Okay, so here we are at the Quindaro site. And then as we walk over here to my right, we can see the main entrance, I guess you would call, to the site. And what you have here is a locked gate. This has been locked every time that we've been here. This overlook itself has been used for community gatherings. And this looks like this area is just used for people who come here maybe in the evenings and just leave their trash, unfortunately. So being British, I'm no expert on bullet holes, but that's what these look like to me. And generally speaking, you know, this is starting to flake off. And it just has a sort of, again, there's trash on the ground. And this is new since I was last here. There's more graffiti on the ground here. We were just here last week and didn't see this, and you can see that there's still trash littering around here. And it's just a shame to me. I mean, this is really the main part of the Quindaro site, and it's clearly, you know, not really being used except for this type of activity. I was just up here in the overlook, and I'm heading towards the stairs that have obviously been put here with a view to leading people down into the ruins themselves and the site of Old Town Quindaro. But as soon as you get to the bottom here, you can already see that there's huge grasses growing in here, and this area has really not been obviously cleared. We've just got it's being reclaimed by vegetation, and as you can see, we're coming down to a little bit of shingle here. But again, this is very minimal and certainly not maintained. And all of the rich history that happened in this area is just, it's not buried under trash, but it's buried under just, you know, it's just buried, it's just being reclaimed. There's nothing here that would tell you this was, you know, sacred ground and important in the history of this country. Okay, so we're just going to walk back up the hill, and as we leave what looks like the river floodplain here, we're heading back up under the railroad, back up towards the Quindaro outlook. And you can just see that the bridge here is, like a lot of the site, to be honest, is falling into some disrepair. Maybe when you come through, you can look. The reinforcements coming through, bits of concrete have dropped. Yeah, it doesn't look in very good shape at all.
Just a couple of weeks ago, the unified government and the Western University Association entered into a memorandum of understanding.
The way the MOU is written, there's no monetary transaction. There's no monetary conveyance. It is conveyance of the land. And if the two organizations cannot work together, the land will not be conveyed. I mean, it's a non-binding MOU.
There's tons of money available for the site. The city won't even make application for the money because they're saying they need 25 to 30 more years.
This project is probably going to outlive the three of us. This project is probably $100 million project over 20 years, if not longer.
Gordon Criswell told us that on May the 8th. He said that the city said it'll take 25 to 30 years for them. Nobody never did no professional planning. Now they have professional people coming.
Well, I think we get there by one, trying to figure out where do we find some dollars to engage a consultant to come in and work with the community. It really ought to be called a founding board. So it's made up of 7 people, 4 people that represent the AME Church and Western University, and 3 people that represent the unified government.
That church is responsible for overseeing through the association like about 85% of the land that falls within the boundaries of the National Commemorative Site and the National Register of Historic Properties. The other 15% in there are owned by different naming entities associated with the unified government.
The unified government does not own the most sacred part of that land. That's the AME Church. But the unified government is the entity that is best situated to bring funds to the project.
Can't say owned and managed by the church. The church isn't effectively doing any clearing or any management of all that. That's very expensive. And it does not have the funds. That's why there's an effort to create an entity to try to raise money to do that kind of clearing. Because The church in and of itself will never be able to do that, in all likelihood. Unless someone by the name of Gates or Buffett were to join the church.
Mahomes.
Mahomes might, yes, definitely Mahomes. Congress has the power of making something arbitrarily an NHL, National Historic Landmark. However, the National Park Service doesn't want you to do that.
We learned early on that the Park Service doesn't really like Congress to designate National Historic Landmarks. They want to do that process and they don't want politicians doing that. But there's a little bit of a chicken and egg. We need to show some local investment. We need to show community involvement. We need to build up the prominence of the site to get it to a spot where it could be a National Historic Landmark.
The spending on the project has not been transparent. And you know, when you don't have a transparent process and you don't put a value on transparency, it's hard to get people to sign up for more.
Over the years, there's been hundreds of thousands of dollars thrown at the Quindaro ruins. And when you look at the ruins present day, you do have to ask the question, where did the money go?
We did not capitalize on the national commemorative designation. We didn't use that as a springboard to move the project forward.
It certainly doesn't look like a whole lot of work has been done, and it doesn't look like a lot is being done right now.
We can talk a lot about infighting and fighting across the aisle on a lot of topics. I don't think we can do that with this topic because the political will was there, the interest was there. And, you know, I don't know that we didn't miss our golden opportunity.
So what was that? What was that money? Was that coming from federal sources or?
Yeah,
state?
from federal sources.
Really?
Yeah.
So what's the status of
I
that?
had heard it was like about $5 million, you know, that would have gotten a lot of stuff started, you know.
It was never really on the table. It was something that could be a possibility. I don't know that we can keep expecting to have people, you know, fall on their sword for the Quindaro ruins. It's just, sorry. All right. We can't be our own worst enemies. Off the record for a second.
Because ultimately, what a site like Quindaro wants to do is be seated at the table with all of the other cultural organizations in the community, right? I mean, there's a cultural banquet going on, and we're all there contributing what we can and participating in the dinner conversation, as it were.
And so for us at the museum, we really represent the Kansas City lens on that American story narrative, not only just the history, but the sound itself. So our museum really is just a beautiful demonstration of the art form. Along with our neighbors, the Negro League Baseball Museum, we really kind of represent a golden standard of what it is to be a part of the Black community and tell the Black story of this community and the people that have really put in the work and sweat to make it what it is.
This is the site of the Battle of Osawatomie. It occurred here on this very site in August, on August 30th, 1856. And this battlefield has been preserved to preserve the memory and the events here that occurred here in not only Osawatomie, but in the area that shaped American history.
I think we're a tremendous resource for the community of Independence itself. And we are a kind of literal bookend to the historic district of Independence.
Yeah, we're situated right now in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, a very normal looking neighborhood in terms of lots of trees, houses next to each other and the like. This particular rescue done by John Brown that I'm speaking of is one of the most well-documented underground railroad elements ever. And because of that, the National Park Service added this site to the Network to Freedom.
We are a public-private partnership. So the government owns and operates this facility. But any of the big upgrades that you see, any of the things like the exhibit and a lot of the programming and the sort of interpretive elements in that way that get baked into our visitor experience, that is raised primarily. There is some government support for that, but primarily that's private dollars that are raised.
We are a partnership site. This is actually, if you look on the map, it is John Brown State Park. I mean, it's owned by the state. There's a 99-year lease on it with the city, and they mow it and take care of it. And the cabin is the same thing. It's a state historic site, but I'm a city employee. So, and we know the city pays for electricity and things like that.
Lawrence has repeatedly looked at preservation of historic structures and finding adaptive reuse in some occasions of those historic structures. But like I said, this is a very stereotypical suburban neighborhood. It would not want a weed growing, dilapidated, falling down building in the middle of this neighborhood.
When people come to Kansas City, what do we tell them we want them to go to? Want to go to the World War I Museum, right? You want to go to Union Station, you want to have some Kansas City barbecue. And oh, we have this historic landmark that is part of the, the Trails to Freedom, part of the Underground Railroad. And some really amazing things happen here.
If I were newly hired to run that site, the first thing I would do is visit all of the other sites in Kansas City and talk to not just the directors of those sites, but the curators and especially the educators, the interpretive specialists that are in each of those sites, and try and learn and find out how do they tell their stories.
If I were to put myself in their shoes, the first thing I would do is I would build up grassroots support in the area, build local pride in it.
And so for folks who are building upon these sites and building upon those rich traditions and history, it's important to lean into community. It's, it's from community that it launched, but it will be with community that it continues forward.
If I had my way, I'd like to see a Smithsonian style museum. There's historic value, but then just from when you look at Wyandotte County and that area, I see it being an economic catalyst as well to bring about the types of developments that disenfranchised area of our community not only wants, but they deserve and need.
The fact is, money that is invested in a cultural organization circulates through the community 7 or 8 times. When people come, for example, to the Truman Library, well, they're probably going to have lunch in one of the restaurants here up on the square in Independence. They're probably going to do some shopping in one of the shops up around the square. They might spend, the hotel nights in Independence. might benefit from the fact that somebody's here. And oh, if they find out, by the way, oh, the trails and the church history stuff and the arts district, that's all here too, they might stay another night. They might have breakfast and then lunch and then dinner. So all of a sudden, the restaurants, the shops, every other business benefits.
People have been coming to see the cabin literally since 1857. I mean, it's just no joke. So it's very important to us. It is one of, if not the main industry that we have here in town.
It's important to take the breadth of what we've got here in the region, to really see it all and take in all of the importance of the history behind it. And it's not always within museum walls, although I adore museums because I help run one. But certainly sometimes we talk about getting outdoors, we talk about getting outside of institutions and really understanding the importance that they contribute to history as well.
And importantly, with Freedom Trail, or even our broader investments with the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area in Western Missouri and Eastern Kansas, this idea of saying that kids now can walk those steps and perhaps kind of see something about it. It will never be exactly the same. But perhaps if you're walking through a cold day in January or a hot day in July, you see experience just a bit of what someone else went through.
This region is made up of some very strong communities, each with very impressive and important cultural sites that add up to not just a tourist opportunity, but I think a profound understanding of what went on here and why that matters.
Even though they're ruins, something in that land, it retains it, right? It retains that not only spiritual quality, but it retains the memory of purpose and of promise. There's something spiritual here. There's something powerful that rises up from where this space is, from what these people have created.
But I really, really hope that places like Quindaro and other places around the country are able to help elevate and share that history that Native people had here. And then, particularly when there were so many tribes and so few tribes are known of in the more mainstream discourse, I think it can be really, really powerful.
Our kids and grandkids are going to write the next chapters in the book of racial equality. And what better way for them to do it than to understand the sacrifices and the struggles that were given to get us to a point of where we are today, and to understand those burdens and to understand that they now carry that torch forward.
The heroes of the war and the struggle aren't just generals, aren't just colonels. They're also these types of folks who are working to develop pathways, these types of folks that built whole communities and networks for freedom. It shouldn't be something on the end of a road as it exists now, on the end of a road where somebody says, oh, there happens to be a place. It instead needs to be the sort of thing where people are saying, this is part of our culture every day.
There really is room at the table for everyone. And we would love to see additional sites and additional facilities come online and be a part of this rich cultural heritage that this region has to offer.
Somebody might slip and tell you something. And because you ask questions of anybody and everybody, you might be able to put a picture together.
In the African-American tradition, New Year's Eve, often black-eyed peas are a culinary staple. And I was actually there in early January last year and saw that some folks had left black-eyed peas and some other kind of African-American culinary traditions.
January 1, I usually try to get the bag of the black-eyed peas,
or I want whoever is dropping those off to be able to share the story that they know about Quindaro, the story that they know about Kansas City. I want every school kid to be able to see it and be able to experience.
Sometimes we've had people, maybe 20 or 30, depending on what the weather's like. But most years it's nobody.
Another big event that happened, as we were getting this film going, is we adopted our son. And he's made me look harder at issues of social reform. There are a lot of things that I want for my son, but one of the things right near the top is I really hope he keeps his heart open to places like Quindaro.
For us to be able to stand here in this place and feel their spirit saying to us, keep going, keep going, keep going till God says done. Our ancestors came right on up the river and kept going and kept going. Rain, snow, sleet, or whatever. And we must stand on that and keep going.
At some point, it's our land. It's the land of certainly my ancestors.
Am I hopeful about the ruins? I don't know. I think there's a huge uphill climb. I just don't know if these two separate entities can work together to get the Quindaro ruins where they need to be. It's something they've tried for a long time. And at what point does somebody say, this just isn't plausible? I know they're not there yet.
He named the site in honor of his daughter Quindaro, which in the French Canadian Wyandotte language means bundle of sticks.
I'm a Democrat, but I vote issue. And for years when I came back home, I was a non-affiliate. And in order to go to some of the little circles that my mother was in, I had to go back, flip to the Democrat Party. But I am loyal to my issue. The history is here, and I tell people often that when Dr. King gave his great speech about having had a dream, it had actually manifested right here in the centermost part of the country at the edge of the Missouri River. This is the Frederick Douglass Underground Railroad 2022 Legacy Award. It was an email, and I just broke down and cried. Literally, I was like, I'm back here.
Mission thus far and great.
Well, my vision, and it's just one vision, is that where the old Douglas Hospital and the old nursing home facility was located, that concrete foundation that you see just behind the John Brown Center statue, that would be a visitor center so that people could pull in, go inside and experience the stories associated with Quindaro. They could then walk out to a renovated overlook. We continue to make errors as a society related to systemic racism. We don't address those things unless we understand how we got to where we are. So I'm a big believer in telling all our history, particularly the uncomfortable parts, because it's those uncomfortable parts that actually give me hope for the future, that we survive the bad things and are moving toward a more just society down the road.
Sing.
And now that we are filled with the history of Quindaro, it is vitally important that the unified government coordinate and collaborate with and establish dialogue with the residents, stakeholders, and stakeholders in the Quindaro area to illuminate the needs of the area and establish a framework in which to bring about restoration and preservation of the ruins as we pursue a renaissance and revitalization of the area. The established and prevailing vision for the area will be presented tonight in a very simple skeletal framework as we flesh our skeleton with the details of the short-term future while working with our community partners and stakeholders, many of whom are here tonight have been working towards our end objective for years. It has been noted of late that we are very close to achieving the National Historic Landmark Program designation for the Quindaro Ruins area, which is a determination made by the U.S. Secretary of the Interior. This designation is just one step below what everyone's objective should be for the Quindaro Ruins area, and that is the designation of a National Historic Park or National Historic Site under the auspices of the National Park Service. The mayor and commission have been presented with maps showing the Quindaro Ruins Archaeological Project area with some notations of property ownership. There is much more detail to be shared as it relates to property ownership, and we have large maps and surveys showing that. However, for tonight or for tonight's discussion, I should note that 27th Street represents the boundary marker that separates the unified government property from the AME property. And if you look on the screen, trying to get my bearings, the top part represents the eastern section or the unified government's land ownership. And of course, the bottom, I plan to have this map a different, but yeah, that's fine. But the bottom represents AME church ownership. Also note that the majority of the currently designated historic district area, I think I do, and it's hard to tell from this map because we reduced it, is on the unified government side of the property, along with the Blakey House and the Vernon School and other sites. I should also note that the old Quindaro Cemetery is under the unified government's ownership since the cemetery was acquired from the AME Church pursuant to the Abandoned Cemeteries Act. And on this map, you can see the cemetery. It's near the bottom. Yeah. Yep. I should have had a better map. While time constraints tonight do not permit us to discuss a number of issues related to various parcels of property, and I would ask that we not create any anxieties over those issues, because there will be time for us to discuss and resolve issues. However, I believe it is important to note and acknowledge that as a part of our vision for the area, the reconstruction of the cemetery road and improvements to the cemetery must be one of the items at the top of our priority list for the Quindaro ruins. I am certain that the members of the Vernon Center Board are happy today after learning yesterday, and we have members of the Vernon Center here with us, after learning yesterday that their much sought after Section 106 clearance has been approved, which puts them a great step closer to receiving their grant funding to make improvements to their facility and replacing the roof. I am also certain that members of the Freedom Frontier Board and staff are equally happy. Additionally, Mr. Hope and his team is a step closer to receiving the much needed funding for repairs to the old Quindaro Cemetery. And we learned that here recently as well. I personally am not a stranger to the Quindaro ruins efforts and undertakings, as I serve as one of the three managers under the tri-party agreement to oversee the Save Our Treasures grant, restoration, and the preservation initiative. And I see one of our members in attendance with us tonight, Mr. Steve Collins, who is another tri-party member. Our third tri-party member was Reverend E. Lewis Branch of the AME Church. Additionally, with the assistance of Johnny Walden and Wilbur Miller of my staff at that time, we designed and built the overlook structure and the steps that takes you down to the ruins area. It was a labor of love for all of us, which included many of the stakeholders here tonight. It was also our agreement that placed the Quindaro artifacts in the hands of the State Historic Preservation Officer and office in Topeka for safekeeping and storage until an archival facility and museum could be built in the Quindaro's area. There are 4 parts to our vision for Quindaro, which, and I already indicated, will be brief in sharing our vision. I am certain this vision will be added to. Additionally, there are many details in this vision that I won't try to flesh out tonight. But our visions, as I said earlier, are in 4 parts. 1, to restore and preserve the ruins structures. Vision 2, enhance and improve access to the ruins site through a connecting link to I-635. And earlier we had a Patty Banks plan that showed how that could be done. Vision 3, to build a trail and signage system for the ruins in a period correct manner. And for the trail, with each ruin site having a computerized interactive sign system display with holograms and talking features. Volunteers, we expect volunteers and employees from the Army Corps of Engineers and others to assist us, particularly in the trail effort. And then Vision 4, build an archival building or a Smithsonian style museum and visitor center that would house the Quindaro ruins artifact. Much like the Save America Treasures Grant initiative, it is expected that the unified government be a lead agency in the community partnership arrangement to provide transparency, oversight, fiscal controls, and accountability and audit review services in the administration of programs and grant management. Such a framework should allow us to start meeting to refine the vision and start implementing that vision immediately. We will hear from some of our stakeholder members and friends tonight. And of course, we'll first hear from Chief Judith Manthe. Judith Manthe. Followed by Chief Justice Berger. And yes.
Quay, how are you today? This has been an important project. The Wyandotte Nation of Kansas has worked hard to try to preserve Quindaro for many, many years. The Civil War is what totally destroyed Quindaro. We were not really allowed to come back. We lost our land. We've lost everything, but we have always been there. We had an underground railroad going on in Ohio. We have continued the underground railroad here in Kansas. We have tried very hard to be stewards of the land and preserve what should be preserved. I am very on board for anything that we can do to Quindaro to get it as the Mimitus site. Like I said in the film, Quindaro is a beautiful place. It needs cleaned up. It needs so much. It has so much potential there to tell the stories. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Lucinda Adams, and I'm the Executive Director of the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. You heard from my predecessor in the film, and I will echo everything that Mr. Ogle said. The Quindaro ruins are not just a Kansas City, Kansas, or a Kansas treasure. It is a nationally significant site that must be preserved. My staff and I are working every day on helping with the National Historic Landmark legislation. In my opinion, that is the first thing that needs to happen, and I think we are on our way to making that happen. Once that happens, we are then in a great place to receive federal funds for the project. The vision that Mr. Murray has talked about, it actually is my vision for the site. I can see the economic impact that would happen to the community if this site were to become a national park site. With a Smithsonian type museum exhibit and visitor center, the amount of tourists that would come into this area is, I'm not even sure how to count that figure. But with a multi, almost $100 million project that this could be, it could really do great for the community. I also see this as a way for our children to learn about what has happened in the past. My daughter's 13 years old. You know, she's fortunate both of her parents are historians. And so we teach her about those things in the past that nobody wants to talk about. But I can see where this site could have every single student in Wyandotte County, Jackson County, Johnson County, coming through to learn about the history of Quindaro, the history of the Native Americans and the African Americans both. And I think that's what is so unique about this site, is the ability to learn about both sets of individuals and people that were part of the area. That doesn't happen a whole lot, and even throughout the country. You know, Freedom's Frontier is one of 62 national heritage areas. We're the only national heritage area that is on the network to freedom. So when I look at this site, I see it as something that will bring people from even just not the United States, but from all over the world that want to learn about the Underground Railroad and also the Native Americans that ended up in our area.
We now have Nikia Hope, representing the concerned citizens of Quindaro, and Mr. Anthony Hope and the Quindaro Museum.
Hi, everybody. As he mentioned, my name is Nakia Hope, current Vice President for Concerned Citizens for Quindaro. And my perspective on the whole situation is a little different. I would like to consider myself what you would call an inheritor of the area. My family is from the townsite of Quindaro. We've been there really since its inception. Robert Monroe, who was mentioned in the documentary, is one of my great grandparents, and he's responsible for me being here today. And a few things that I wanted to mention to you all today. One, we were established, like the documentary talks about, in 1983, after threat of the landfill, to try to protect the area and preserve its history. And we've been around ever since. And one of our main goals is to preserve the area and the history of the area. And one of the things that the documentary mainly focused on was the way that the area looks right now as it relates to cleanup. Being someone who lives in the area, who has always lived in the area, I'm 27 years old. I've seen it through its good times and not so good times. One thing that I can say is that we cannot expect others to respect the area if it doesn't look like we respect the area. And I have, taken countless pictures, recorded countless videos of dumping in the area. I drive through the area every day. I take my daughter to Quindaro Park almost every day during the summertime. I'm constantly reporting on the dumping in the area. My family is buried in the Old Quindaro Cemetery. My uncle, Jesse Hope III, who was the founder and curator for the Old Quindaro Museum in the early 2000s, around 2002, helped with refurbishing the cemetery and bringing it up to a decent standard. But we constantly see a general disrespect of the area by new community members. Some of it, I venture to say, is because they don't think the area is cared about, because there's only so much that we can do. So we have a very vested interest in the cleanup of the area. I was just in the Old Quindaro Cemetery a couple weeks ago. I have myself had to pick up trash from in front of the gate to be able to drive my car to the cemetery. I myself have had to pick up huge branches out the middle of the road that leads to the cemetery to be able to get my car to the cemetery. On Memorial Day, as I was placing flowers on my great grandparents, there were community members riding dirt bikes through the cemetery. And a lot of it is, you can't tell it's a cemetery until you get up there and see it's a cemetery. There's no signage at the front gate that would let you know it's a cemetery. There's no signage leading on the road that would let you know that it's a cemetery. And a lot of the area, as the documentary showed, is unkept in that way. So I think a great starting place for us to work on together is figuring out how to make that a little more of a priority, the upkeep of the area. And I'm interested in working with you all as well as the rest of the community to play my part in that, because like I said, I'm an inheritor of the land. I have a 3-year-old daughter and she's going to be next to inherit the land. So I want it better preserved for her as well. Another thing that that Concerned Citizens for Quindaro focuses on is the Quindaro Museum, which is located at 3432 North 29th Street in the area of Quindaro. That museum was established in late 2008, early 2009 by my uncle, Jesse F. Hope III, who has passed away. He was the curator of the museum. And we share a unique perspective in that we share stories of community members who have been there, those who have escaped slavery and created a life for themselves in the area. We housed historic artifacts from community members from Western University. The house that the museum was located in was the first house in the area to have lights and cold and hot water. As Mr. Murray mentioned, we're one step closer to getting funding to restore the house. After my uncle passed in 2015, we didn't have the funding and the infrastructure to be able to do that. In this new season, we kind of got stopped with COVID, but in this new season, we're working our way towards that. We also hope to, as the Old Quindaro Museum, be a part of continued conversation, because I think we share a unique perspective on the area. I think we share a unique history on the area. In our inception, we had people coming from as far as France to come to the museum and to take tours. Even last summer, we did a family reunion of about 25 people on a walking tour to show them the area. So I think that the history is still sought after. I think that people still want the information. And I'm hoping that we can start at better preserving the area. Simple measures to better preserve the area, signage. I'm willing to start small and work our way up big, but we would just like to be a part of those conversations. Seeing as how we have, first level experience, we're there every day. We see it every day. We work a lot with the Wyandotte Nations. That's like our family. So we've worked a lot together to try to help the area. And like I mentioned, we just want to continue to be a part of the conversation with you all and provide support. We want to help y'all help us, really. So thank you.
And Janeth English, Kristen Zane. And so we'll have Steve Collins, and Steve brought some material. Dr. Steve Collins for the commission did not bring enough copies, so we'll leave a copy with the clerk and make sure we get copies made.
Yes, hello. My name is Steve Collins. I was a teacher at Kansas City, Kansas Community College. I was also project director for the Quindaro Ruins Archaeological Park Project, one of the tripartite directors with Mr. Murray and also Reverend Branch. It's a pleasure to address you. And I don't know where the mayor went, but I talked with him before he was the mayor at the overlook at the ruins. And he told me, if I'm elected, I'm going to do something about Quindaro. And he has, and he does. And there's a great deal of hope, I think, now that wasn't there. I don't have a slide to show anyone, but I'll hold these up as I talk. First of all, the importance of Quindaro. I'm going to do this very quickly. The importance of the Quindaro ruins is in its multicultural cooperation. In the middle of tremendous conflict with slave-owning populations just across the river watching, there was this African-American, Indigenous American, and Caucasian American cooperation. It's important to remember that the Wyandotte Nation of Kansas, then the Wyandotte tribe, were forced to come down. And when they got here, they brought with them a pre-adaptation to the Underground Railroad. They had an Underground Railroad in their Ohio reservation, and they had a maroon community there. So when they came down here, they had this system in place, and the Underground Railroad in Quindaro began almost as soon, if not before, the town was even started. So they're very important. The county, by the way, is called Wyandotte County. I'd like to see it spelled W-Y-A-N-D-O-T instead of the French usage. According to the Hope family, at the time, Jesse had told me that there were 13 families in Quindaro who had come through Quindaro running away from slavery, and that they had returned after and represent the core of the Quindaro community now. These folks were courageous on their own. It's important to remember that slavery is something that the individual slave had to deal with, and the individual slave made the decision to leave on her own. The Harriet Tubman-like raids, yes, they happened, but they were very small amounts. So the courage is in the slave himself. Once they got up to the Ohio River and of course out here on the west, then the Underground Railroad helped considerably. This map, which I'll just show you here, is the Leonhard map. And the Leonhard map, this was a gentleman who fought for a free state here in Kansas. And in 1857, 1858, he drew this map. It's the only map that I'm aware of the Eastern Territorial Kansas Underground Railroad. It's a stunning and rare item. And Quindaro is mentioned right up here, along with John Walden, who is the editor of the Quindaro Chindawan. This is just an incredible document. The first train of Free State folks that came out from Boston to Kansas Territory had as one of its members Samuel Tappan. And after the Underground Railroad is operating for a bit, he finds that the funds are very much running out. And so he writes a letter to Thomas Higginson, who is one of the 6 who try to get John Brown out of prison. Doesn't happen, but he tried. Well, the gentleman has supported the Underground Railroad in the past, and they're asking for funds. And I'm going to suggest to you that this one sentence in this document that you will get, this one sentence is extremely important. I think it's the most important sentence among the data for Underground Railroad in the state of Kansas. And let me just read it quickly. I'm happy to inform you that a certain railroad has been and is in full blast at Quindaro. Several persons have taken full advantage of it to visit their friends. Only 1 or 2 accidents have happened. Our funds in these hard times have nearly run out, and we need some help, for the present is attached with considerable expense. Here's the sentence. If you know of anyone desirous of helping the cause, just mention our case to him and ask him to communicate with Walter Oakley in Topeka, James Blood, or myself in Lawrence, or Sam C. Smith in Quindaro. This letter is nothing short of a blueprint of the bureaucratic structure of the organization, the Underground Railroad in Eastern Territorial Kansas. And it's dramatic. It is something we should emphasize in the archive that is established. Finally, and bear with me, please. Yes, there should be a trail system because it's wonderful to walk that trail system. However, we have a wonderful site that is very, very steep. I've traversed this 100-foot vertical drop up and down dozens and dozens of times. We need to make this site accessible. I would like to propose an aerial tram system that glides over the site, providing bird's eye views that one usually does not get at an Underground Railroad site. Did you notice the drone from this gentleman's video? Those are really interesting sites. You're floating. I can imagine people floating down to the first landing, which is down at 5th and Kansas Avenue, looking around, getting back on the tram, going to the brewery building landing, looking around, then reboarding, going up to the cemetery landing, and from there back to the top of the river bluff. And when they get there, of course, there'll be a 6-story tall building sitting on the bluff with a restaurant on the very top, shops, all kinds of things you can buy. It'll be wonderful. Everybody gets rich and people get educated. So think about it. We have nothing short of a World Heritage site at Quindaro, nothing short of a World Heritage site. It seems completely reasonable at the least to work towards a national park designation for this site. We need to show the world our gem as we celebrate freedom, equality, and social justice in our history. Thank you, Mayor Gardner, and this committee for the important work you're doing.
It has been requested that we hear from Reverend Evans, and we'll conclude with Marvin Robbins.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I wanted to just share some historical things that I think are important. My name is Reverend Stacy Evans, and I am the chair of the Quindaro Ruins Townsite Project, as well as the chair for the Western University Association of the AME Church. So I am the representative of the AME Church, and I wanted to share just a few things real quickly. For example, how the AME Church gets the property. There was a Presbyterian minister who founded the Freedmen School. And then the school goes, it gets started and everything. And then the AME Church is right there, lockstep with the Presbyterian minister to develop the school. Later, when this gentleman is elderly and about to pass, he wants to pass on the property to the AME Church because AME Church was instrumental in bringing African-American students to the school. So when he dies, he sees that the town is going down, he buys up large swaths of it. And then when he does die, he gives it to the AME Church. Later on in 1881, the AME Church moves the property up to the top of the bluff and turns it into a very prominent HBCU, historically Black college. The Western University is also a very prized possession of Wyandotte County, and is still considered an HBCU to this day. I want to say that National Treasures grant was a $250,000 grant. These are easily provable, which is to call to the Historic Society, National Parks and Historical Societies. It was a $250,000 grant that was granted, but it was a matching grant up to $900,000. As has been said already, Mr. Murray, Mr. Collins, and Mr. Branch's signatures are all over it. However, it was never matched. So the $1 million, close to $1 million, was never achieved, even though everybody thought it should have been a walk in the park to match that grant at that time when they had received it. So it was only $250,000. Where did the money go? The money went to a few people whose signatures are on there, I believe. And then also, it's very clear that most of the money, the bulk of it, like $150,000 or so, went to building the overlook. So there was no $1 million, and there's never been $5 million. These are all easily provable by the UG, I'm sure as well, National Parks and the Kansas Historic Society. And then as far as the upkeep of the property, as a part of that grant that was received to build the overlook, there was a covenant agreement with the unified government to care for that property and the cemetery. I have gone back and asked the Kansas Historic Society to give me those agreements. To my understanding, there is an agreement with the unified government that they will care for the cemetery. They were supposed to keep the brush off of the foundations, but it just never happened. Over the years, of course, it just grew back. Last year, we cleared the property, did an awesome job of it, and in just one summer, it has really, really overgrown again. So it grows back very quickly. But again, very easily provable that the unified government signed a covenant agreement to help care for the property so that it would not get back to the shape that it is in. Now, having said all of that, the AME Church, the Quindaro Townsite Project, is very much a collaborative organization. Over the years, we have met with everyone, what I consider to be those stakeholders, since I've been a part of the project for now 14 years. The Western University Association Board has existed for about 50 years. A lot of people have passed away wishing and hoping that this project would take place. And I feel like a lot of it is on my shoulders to make it happen. I'm very open to working with anybody who is interested in helping Quindaro to be everything that you've talked about tonight. A lot of it, in fact, sounds flipped right out of the paper from the interviews that I've done. So we're very interested in doing all of it. The Smithsonian, like visitor center, the trails, the signs. We've done meetings in our basement with the Wyandotte Nation, Marvin Robinson, the old Quindaro Museum, the Vernon Center, Freedom's Frontier. And we helped Freedom's Frontier to do that symposium along with all the other stakeholders here. So we're not interested in fighting or not being a part of anything. We want to be a part. I think what makes an issue is that the property is owned by the AME Church. And as the lady said in the start of the video, Black people have learned not to just give up property willy-nilly. And so we want to work and do anything and everything that we can to be a part of the bringing together of Quindaro. I've heard tell of people saying that we should turn the property over to national parks or over to national this. I've talked with national parks. They've told me many times that you don't necessarily have to turn the property over. In fact, before we decided to do this unified MOU with unified government, we attempted to do it with the Kansas Historic Society and national parks. And they both said to me that we already have so many properties that we're not managing well. We really don't think we'll make a good partner. And that's how we got into partnership with the unified government. So the whole purpose of that MOU was to do something great. So that's why I'm here. I'm here because I want to do something great, want to work with the community. I was a part of the master plan, all of those weeks, going and listening and putting the dots. And then Quindaro turned out to be the #1 thing that people wanted to see happen. I know that it's the #1 requested tour. And last year, nearly 1,000 people toured the site. We have cleared and cleaned it. You no longer have to go down those steep stairs. You can go around. And we did punch it through so that you can walk through and it's much more accessible. So those are the things that I wanted to share. Thank you. And the AME Church was a part of the landfill, but so were others. But I'm not here to point fingers or any of that because I didn't have a dog in that fight. I've only been here the last 14 years and I want to make it happen along with everybody.
And forgive me, I forgot, we have Elnora Jefferson representing the NDR for the Northeast area. We'll hear from her and then we'll close with Marvin Robinson. I had Mr. Smith on earlier, but okay. So and we've got just 10 minutes, but Elnora, Marvin, do you mind closing? And then we'll hear from Mr. Smith and then Marvin Robinson.
Well, good evening, everyone on the dais, as well, everyone here in the audience and so forth. I didn't realize that I was going to speak tonight, so it's going to be extemporaneous, but I'll do my very best to make it clear. Just taking notes while I was here, and I do appreciate what Reverend Stacy said about her 14 years, because a lot was said, a lot was implied, that fell on her shoulders. I think that I don't think I'm very, very comfortable with saying this is the only way that this project is going to take off and be representative of the history which it reserves, as well as everything else along the call point and one of the images or the visions that Jack Reardon had was to connect those types of tourist attractions. Is if we do two things. Number one, we do collaborate. And that's a word that I have a definition, but I think we need to come to a bearing of what that actually means, actually to collaborate. And then also to trust, as this is a big project and a lot of parts to there. A lot of people have various interests. We have our human interests as well as the interest of the tourism itself. I know for a fact that Quindaro ruins call point, and by which I would like to also, Mr. Murray, make in your notes that although we're talking about the Quindaro ruins, we're missing a key figure there at the call point, which is York. Okay, when we talk about Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea as well. So we have a lot to come together in order to build on and to get rid of the angst and the tragedies that the slavery brought to these shores. I might also give a thanks to Mayor Gardner, as I've spoken with him several times about things like this, and most recently about a sister city. Some years ago, 12 or 13 years ago, before I co-founded the NBR, noticed that there was not a sister city in Africa. It just didn't happen for some other reason. So if we're going to invest time and money into something like the Quindaro ruins and other things like that, I think we need to take a broad look at what we represent here as a county and as a city. So the mayor has given me permission to go on with that sister city idea in Africa. I'm going to pursue it with all the heart, passion that I have. But I thank you for listening. And I thank the people who spent years, your life here with the Quindaro ruins, and have something invested in it. Each and every one of them. And I just hope that everyone can find his or her path by what you need out of the collaboration, so that you get what you need, the other people get what they need, and we're all successful. So thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Murray.
We have Mr. Luther Smith representing the Vernon Center, and I believe he's a member of the Western University Board Treasurer as well.
I want to say good evening to everyone, mayor, commissioners, and all our fans here. I've been around Quindaro. Well, I was born in Quindaro. I'm probably one of the older members around there now, and you know, I've seen Quindaro when it was a thriving place, and I want to see it, and I've seen it go downhill, but I want to see it come back. I'm a member of the from the Freedom Frontier Trustee Board, and I'm also a member of the Western Memory Club Association. So it's a thing that I'm the director of the Quindaro Underground Railroad Museum, and also I'm on the board for the multipurpose center at Vernon School. And what I really like to push about Vernon School is it was named after Bishop William Tecumseh Vernon, and he was at one time he was president of Western University, and there's a lot of people don't know that there was a university out in Quindaro, but it was the first Black university west of the Mississippi. And so it's the thing that, a lot of that, well, all of that land is vacant now. But I want to see, I'd like to see some big building put up over there where we could have all our archives and stuff like that. And I'm a member of the Grigsby family. They came in from Liberty, Missouri around 1855. So our family knows a lot about Quindaro, and we've done a lot for the area, and we hope that one day soon that everything Well, what I'd really like to see is that, like Vernon School, I'd like to see it become like the Visitors Bureau of Quindaro. And then I'd like to see the Quindaro area become like a national park. And we can get that accomplished. I think that would really be something that, well, it'd be good for Kansas City, Kansas, and also for the state of Kansas and the United States, you might say. So I'm hoping that we can keep things on the table and work together. And because if you don't negotiate, you're not going to get anything accomplished. And it seems to be that, you know, from some of the conversations I've heard, you know, it's the thing that negotiations aren't going like they should. So if we can get that working out over the table, things should go real good for us. And I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. And I always tell people when they come to the museum to tell their family and friends we're there. And I've had people come in from all over the United States and some from foreign countries, you know, to see the museum. And I really enjoy showing it. And so come out when you can, all of you. And that's it for this evening. Thank you.
We'll close with Representative Marvin Robinson.
Okay. Thank you. Having had the opportunity to experience the legislature, I have even more profound appreciation for those of you in leadership than I used to. So thank you for doing what you do. Let's see. There are so many things that were said tonight, but Dr. Robert Hort with the who's retired from the Kansas State Historic Society. Every time we got a new Kansas State Historic Society archaeologist, I would always call because the original archaeologists helped coach us on the importance of the site and helped to get the Pompeii of Kansas identified because that's historical record. And so every time there was a switch, I used to always call to even the executive director for the Kansas State Historic Society. I would call and introduce myself and ask, what do we need to do next? And then I have been blessed to work with Nicodemus Historic Society people, and I knew them from Emporia State University, some of the descendants from there, and Brown versus Topeka. And we had a cultural heritage tourism component. And we were sent to DC and Indianapolis, Boston for trainings. And so the Quindaro site is actually modeled off of places that have all the accolades. You have to every so many years try to apply for more designations. And so when this guy, Robert Hort, was selected, and it was announced in some media place that we had a new director. So I called and asked him, told him who I was with Quindaro, what do we need to do? And he was like, he hadn't had a chance to turn around and find out anything. He's sitting right back there. And so I kept calling 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 times. And then he finally got to it. He said, well, what you need to do is just quit making people upset. And he said it a lot nicer. Because the site is destined for a National Historic Landmark. I don't know if he remembers that or not. And I tried to do that. And then Kansas, a lot of stuff just doesn't work. It backfires, but we have more platforming than ever before with the National Historic Landmark at the verge of occurring, and the goal, ulterior motive, is to use the site as a way to, I'm really nervous. I always get nervous and I shouldn't be. I use the site as a way to sensitize and improve race, class, and cultural relationships by employment opportunities for people who are chronically unemployed or underemployed, or some people will never be a good employee because that just doesn't work, but they have so many skills, that entrepreneurship, development, training opportunities, so that the Indigenous, Aboriginal, African-American community is allowed to be a part of that whole thing to boost individual and collective esteem, to help reduce violence and crime and senseless homicide. And that's what I've tried to tell people forever. But anyway, there's so many different things that I would like to try to share, but in being brief and respectful of the time, because one thing I hate about the unified government when I used to watch some of the formatings on the screen is that your meetings take way too long. And I feel for the staff and for the people that are having, it's just, anyway, see, what I wanted to say is archaeology, 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 archaeology. The site is Pompeii of Kansas. It is the archaeology that drives the site. It is how it's registered, placed in the National Register of Historic Places. Only the unified government's portion is included in the National Register of Historic Places. The other people who have property, they can apply for the National Register of Historic Places, but we have gotten this far only on the 56 acres of the unified government's property. For the National Register of Historic Places, a precursor. So archaeology, 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 and then several years ago, we saw where the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a Veterans Archaeological Program. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a Veterans Archaeological Project where you contact them and they'll come in and sit down and do the focus on archaeological stabilization. Anything that happens with some of the great visions that were shared, it would require Section 106, and that could take 18 to 24 months for the Interior Department to weigh in, even with the National Register of Historic Places. But we were told that by the trainings at Boston and the Madam C.J. Walker Complex and the workshops in Washington, D.C. So we're only following the regulations and the guideposts to make sure that this great, unduplicated, priceless resource has the opportunity for populations of American citizens to enjoy into the future. And I could not thank you more. Thank you.
And thank you, members of the commission, mayor and county administrator. We do plan to follow up with meetings with our stakeholders, and we will coordinate as we move things forward. And thank you to our audience.
Thank you, Mr. Murray, and thank you for everyone that gave a presentation. I don't want to let this opportunity for such a unique and profound topic that really has a lot of potential for something special for Wyandotte County get away without allowing any commissioners that would like to weigh in on the topic, if you'd like. We have Commissioner Townsite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening to all who have attended here. I would like to acknowledge everyone who is currently a resident or trace their lineage back to the Quindaro Township to stand up. I see a lot of faces here. They may not have spoken tonight because this is a thriving community, and I've tried to support them with the revitalization of the nearby park there, because I know this day is coming. And I have to thank our mayor for putting this on forefront. Certain things happen at a given time. I was actually born in Quindaro at the hospital and recall as a kid at Dunbar taking groceries there. That was our Thanksgiving deal. Can you imagine taking groceries to KU or in this? In 1983, I was living in New Jersey and remember reading the Call newspaper, and it was filled with the efforts of people like the Hopes, Mr. Robinson, others I can call, who were trying to salvage that historic area from becoming a dump site. So it's like a coming together, a revitalization. I'd like to recognize and thank the members and the chief of the Wyandotte Nation who were here. I recall meeting Chief Jan English, and so I look forward to working with Chief Mankey and all the other members of the Wyandotte Nation. Thank you, Ms. Zane, Ms. Libby. Forgive me if I've not called anybody else, but I'm so proud of my state representative. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Thank you, Mr. Robinson, and all who supported him. So Quindaro rise,
And as we move forward with this project, we've heard a lot of what was, but let's concentrate on going forward and what the word Quindaro means, stronger together. So rise up, Quindaro. If you're a member of the Quindaro area, stand up. I'd like to acknowledge your presence tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have Commissioner Markle.
Thanks, Mayor. This was a wonderful presentation. My brother was in a high school class that did cleanup on the site way back in the day. I feel really old now, but it didn't seem that long ago, but I guess it was. And it was a great experience for him. And so I'd love to see it be an experience for more students as a site instead of as a cleanup site going forward. This is clearly not in my district and a little bit outside of my stomping ground. So I was aware of the site and the history of the site. What I think I wasn't aware of that I think has sort of been referenced tonight is that it sounds like there are a lot of parties and interest here, which is awesome. But it sounds like those parties and interest maybe are not always on the same page. And that puts a government in a really awkward position if you're preparing to come forward and ask for support, because we don't want to have to pick and choose which party and interest we're going to give support to and risk offending those other interested parties who really want to help the site. So I guess I would just say, to the extent those different parties and interests can get together and come forward as a united front, that makes it a whole lot less awkward for us to have that conversation. And I know those conversations might be awkward for all of you, but it really does put a government in a bad position if there are a bunch of interested parties and they're all coming forward looking for different kinds of support or looking for us to push forward their concept for the site. We need all of those people to be on one page. So again, it's a little bit outside of my world. I wasn't aware that there were maybe those differing parties underlying this issue, but it's clear from this meeting tonight, although the references were a little bit veiled, that there are a lot of parties out there, and that's awesome. We should capitalize on that. That means there are a lot of people that are interested in moving the site forward, but we need you to be together.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Davis.
Thanks, Mayor, and I will be brief. To everybody that has presented, thank you all. This is very, very educational. I see some folks from Urban Hikes KC actually went on a hike through the ruins this past Monday, and so got kind of a real a good taste of what it really is like to go through it right now. And even being there, you are really going through what I would consider sacred ground, where people have put their blood, sweat, and tears into building something beautiful. And I would love to see us come together and work and find a path forward. I'm still fairly new to Wyandotte County. My district is further west and actually north of Commissioner Markney's district, but a good portion of my district is African-American, and actually I have a lot of constituents that are former residents of the Northeast that moved. And so I get asked about Quindaro more than you would think, even though it's not necessarily my area. And so I look forward to working with you, Mayor, and commissioners, and all of the stakeholders, right? The AME Church, right? Western University. We have to figure this out. I think our kids, our children's children are looking back and saying, will we figure this out? I look forward to compromise. I look forward to us being able to put something together that would be historic, not just for Wyandotte County, not just for the state of Kansas, but for our nation and for the world. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to have allow our administrator just to give a few words, some thoughts.
Just like our representative from the NBR, I did not know I was talking, but as a new person to this area, about 5 months now, it is amazing on the historic portfolio that is included within Wyandotte County. I think we all appreciate the stockyards, the railroads, the Lewis and Clark tie. We're just south of the Oregon Trail and the Pony Express. This is rich. Then you hear about Quindaro. And in a time where there is tension amongst people within between ethnic groups, we can step back to this 1840s and 50s and see a community where people actually lived in harmony, if I may be so bold. The Native Americans, the African Americans, Caucasians, and I've heard also the Hispanics who called this place home way back when this was under Spanish rule. It's quite a laboratory, something that we should celebrate. If we appreciate our history, we can see a brighter future. We can appreciate the struggles of people who have come before us and rise above them for a brighter future for our children and grandchildren. So we heard through all these presentations that we need to work together to get a common vision to make the place special. So this idea of using this forum as a start of collaboration for an important part of our history, our identity, and our beacon to the future is imperative. I look forward to being part of that process and working with all of you to transcend your personal agenda toward a common community agenda. That's what's important. What's best for the community who are living today, who will live here tomorrow? What quite an honor to those who came before us and gave us this opportunity to celebrate. I also want to let you know that probably about 6 weeks ago, I was contacted by some people that may have funds to at least start something. When we talked to Congresswoman Davids and our US senators and even Congressman Cleaver across the river in Kansas City, they say they'd love to help us, but we have no vision. We have no master plan. They don't know what to fund. So it is imperative to come together and to use our energies and our common love for this area to create this special place and get it on paper so we can sell it and entice the public officials in Washington and in Topeka to help us out. So we can talk. There's not going to be any fundings until we have something to show. So this collaboration has to go to something. And that is, what do we want this place to look like? What services do we want them to contribute to the community? And how do we make it special? So again, there are people that I talk to that have wallets, but they're looking for the vision. And as we heard from our state representative, the main message is we have to work together, have to have the common ground. And if we don't do that, we're not going anywhere. Sorry to be so candid, but that's the truth. So let's use this as a rallying point to work together in short order to get that vision, so then we can talk to other officials and get this to be a reality. So sorry, I got a little passionate there, but I'm new. You can blame me for that. But let's work together to get this done. This is a special place, unique place. When I managed Covington, Kentucky, we were the end of a underground railroad. They just had to get to Cincinnati, cross the Ohio River. But we had homes along the river, on both the Licking River and the Ohio River, that had special hidden rooms in their basements, that had tunnels to the shore of the river. And we celebrated that because we were the gateway to freedom for so many people who were oppressed. What a special role. We had that here, but we had something more where you had people who of different backgrounds, ethnicities, races that said, you know what? Living together, we can create a great place to call home. So let's use Mr. Murray's forum here as a springboard to do something wonderful. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Administrator. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you again, Mayor. Couple of acknowledgements I also wanted to make. Love movies, documentaries are so important, so I will not be remiss, do not want to be remiss in not acknowledging and thanking Mr. Mark Meisenheimer for his great work. If you just stand, raise your hand. And I know equally important is the producer, and I don't know if Mr. Smith is here tonight, but I thank him as well. Thank you, Judge Martinez, for coming and showing support. And of course, thank you to Chief Justice of the Kansas Court of Appeals, Judge Karen Berger. Thank you for your attendance and involvement in this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd be remiss. I know part of my job, really my role here at the Unified Government as your mayor, is to bring forth a vision and carry that vision to this commission and trying to collaborate with them and convince them that it's the right vision for them to consider. But there were a lot of people involved in this. Mr. Murray, I can't take full credit because I said, Levert, we need to get Quindaro moving. And he said, give it to me, I got it. And he's worked on it years before probably I was even arrived to Kansas City. He did 40 years almost here at the Unified Government's Economic Development Director. And he's one of the key stakeholders, you know, in the current overlook that's there. And he's gathered a lot of information. He's worked with a lot of groups and gathered a lot of great wisdom in regards to the Quindaro ruin. And he put this together and he said, I got it. And he took it. So let's give Mr. Levert Murray a round of applause. It's his years of relationships that really allows him to bring a lot of seasoned people together that I may not have a relationship with, as well as younger folks that we've seen tonight that also want to carry on the legacy of the significance of the Quindaro ruin. One thing I can say is you've heard a lot about unity and coming together, and that is something that really needs to happen with this project. The time for talk is over. We have got to move the Quindaro ruins out of ruin. Can we agree on that? Our Commissioner Townsend already has come up with a tagline, and I think we need to adopt it. And she said, Quindaro rise. And I think that is a good, bright initiative to take on. And let's look at Quindaro rising from the ruins into something really awesome for Wyandotte County. Now, I'm going to say it because you've all watched over the course of the year since I've been mayor. You know, we have not always agreed politically up here in the Unified Government. We've had strong, heated debates right here. But what I can say is that I believe that every last one of these commissioners and our staff, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't care about Wyandotte County. But more importantly, I can say that Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Townsend, and Commissioner Johnson came to the table and said, Mayor, what do we need to do? Let's work together. Whatever political differences at this point doesn't matter. This is too big of something for Wyandotte County, and it's bigger than all of us. I've talked to Congressman Cleaver, Congressman Davids. I've talked to the governor's office. I've talked to Congressman LaTurner. I've talked to stakeholders, people with big wallets, and our administrators, right. You have people that really want us to get our act together so they can invest and make this project not just a dream, but a reality, and not a reality just for Wyandotte County, but a reality that the entire nation can be proud of. Something that hopefully, if it's done right, with what you heard on some of the visioning, and I'm not saying that's got to be that vision is just a thought, because really it's going to take all of us, and all of us really got to decide what is the best fit and outcome for Wyandotte County when we talk about the Quindaro ruins. But the ultimate vision is this can be a catalyst to really revitalize and reinvigorate an area that has been disinvested, and bring life back to a community that has died, should have never died. When you talk about freedom and hope and what that meant for so many people that cross that river to freedom. And we owe it to those people that risked their lives to make sure that their ancestors and this community upholds that plight and that sacrifice and that struggle that every human being has to just want to be free. If you talk about and you look at the preamble, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And so no one should be left behind in Wyandotte County. And you've heard about some of the challenges from Ms. Hope, the blight, the decay. We can fix those things. I share with what you've heard some of these commissioners say is, let's come together as a community and set aside our differences and find a way to do something really great that the world can be proud of. That's my challenge as your mayor. Thank you. And thank you for everybody that presented tonight. I don't want to miss anybody, so I'm not going to name anybody. But everybody that was here that contributed, every stakeholder, everybody that's worked here recently or throughout the years, even before me, thank you for your continued effort and for not losing hope and for being here today because you care not just about the Quindaro ruins, but you care about Wyandotte County. So thank you so much. At this time, I will adjourn this special session. Our staff is going to need at least 20 minutes to set up for the actual commission meeting. So we will reconvene here at exactly 7:35. I apologize for the lateness of I'm sorry.
Motion to adjourn special session.
Okay, they beat me to it. There is a motion and a second. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are adjourned. We will reconvene for the regular commission meeting at 7:35.
We invite all of you to stay for the exciting UG Commission meeting.
If we could all prepare. Greetings. This is the regular session of your full commission meeting of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. Today is August 31st, 2023. We will start off with the planning and zoning portion of this regular session. But before I call this meeting to order, I want to announce that some commissioner, staff, and the public are attending remotely via Zoom, by phone, or on site. All participants joining by phone should please mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak, so the public that is observing knows exactly who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and is current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General's office. I will now call the meeting to order. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call. Markley? Here. Stites, we have an absence memo. We have an absence memo for Davis. Bynum? Here. Burrows?
Here.
Townsend? Here. McKiernan?
Here.
We have an absence memo for Ramirez. Johnson?
Here.
We have an absence memo for Kane and Garner.
Here. Tonight, we're going to have an invocation given by Reverend George Kemper. I don't see him. So we will ask Commissioner and Pastor Johnson to give the invocation. I'll ask everybody to stand, and immediately following, we will proceed into the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory in the heavens. We pray, God, tonight that we welcome you and your presence into our meeting this evening. Thank you for this mayor and every commissioner and leader at every level of our community. Give us grace to bring truth, justice, and stability to our county, to our city. For this, we give you the praise and the glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson, for the invocation. Clerk, are there any revisions tonight for this agenda?
Mayor, there are no revisions.
Clerk, could you please read the statement?
Good evening. We would like to welcome all present to this meeting of the Unified Government Commission. Members of the commission are Mayor CEO Tyrone Garner, Commissioner Melissa Bynum, at-large District 1, Commissioner Tom Burrows, at-large District 2, Commissioner Gail Townsend, District 1, Commissioner Brian McKiernan, District 2, Commissioner Kristen Ramirez, District 3, Commissioner Harold Johnson, District 4, Commissioner Mike Kane, District 5, Commissioner Angela Markley, District 6, Commissioner Chuck Stites, District 7, and Commissioner Andrew Davis, District 8. As each petition is called, all persons for or against will be given the opportunity to express their views. If this is the first time that a particular petition has been before the commission has three options. 1, it can approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission with 6 votes. 2, it can override the Planning Commission's recommendation, but it would take 8 votes to override. 3, it can return the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration, together with a statement specifying the reasons for the referral back to the Planning Commission. The consent agenda is the first part of the planning and zoning agenda. Items on the consent agenda have received a unanimous vote of recommendation by the Planning Commission. Unless there is a request to set aside an item from the consent agenda by the applicant, a member of the public, the Unified Government Commission, or others, then the Planning Commission's recommendations on all of the items on the consent agenda will be adopted by the Unified Government Commission at one time. I will read the list of agenda items on the consent agenda, and when I have completed the list, the mayor will ask if there are any requests to set aside items from the consent agenda. This is your time to come to the microphone and provide the agenda item to be set aside if you do not agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. If you're joining us virtually, this is your time to raise your hand and, once acknowledged, provide the agenda item to be set aside. If you contacted the UG Clerk's office, that item will be set aside by the UG Clerk on your behalf. If an item is set aside, the matter will be discussed and voted on separately. All items not set aside will be approved with the Planning Commission's recommendation. We appreciate the attendance of those people here this evening, and we recognize the importance of each petition. We would, however, remind you that there are a number of items on the agenda, and we would appreciate your efforts to make your remarks as concise as possible. We ask that anyone with a cell phone, please turn them off or switch to non-audio so you will not disturb the meeting. If joining us virtually or by phone, we ask that you mute your phone when not speaking to avoid background noise so you will not disturb the meeting. Once the petitioners make their presentation, anyone for or against will be allowed the maximum 3 minutes to state their views. As you come to the microphone, please state your name and city for the record if attending in person. This is also your time to raise your hand if you're joining us virtually. When your name is called, please state your name and city for the record. The mayor and commission are required to disclose contacts with proponents or opponents on any item on the planning and zoning agenda. At this time, does any member of the commission wish to disclose any contact with proponents or opponents on any item on the agenda?
I'll read it, Eric. Do any members of the commission, the county administrator, or the public wish to set aside any item on the planning and zoning consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the planning and zoning consent agenda will be voted on by one vote to follow the recommendation of the planning commission. I'll now ask if anyone is in attendance who would like to set aside an item. Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually that'd like to? I'm sorry, the clerk advised the items need to be read. Clerk?
I will now read the items on the consent agenda. Special use permit applications. SP 2023-034, James N. Vines. Special use permit to keep 20 chickens at 9350 Nelson Lane. Recommended for approval for 5 years. Number 2, SP 2023-043, Ferris Ferocity with Casey Outlook Rosedale LLC. Special use permit to operate a children's daycare at 2605 West 39th Avenue. Recommended for approval for 2 years. Number 3, SP 2023-051, Ruben Rosales. Special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 2924 Eaton Street. Recommended for approval for 1 year. Number 4, SP 2023-053, Elizabeth Harding. Special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 2822 West 43rd Avenue. Recommended for approval for 1 year. Number 5, SP 2023-056, Caleb and Madison Bersinius. Special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 4206 Mission Road. Recommended for approval for 1 year. Miscellaneous ordinances. Number 1, an ordinance rezoning property at 9400 State Avenue from AG Agricultural and CO Non-Retail Business Districts to CP2 Planned General Business District. Recommended for approval. Number 2, an ordinance authorizing a special use permit at 9400 State Avenue for an event center at the Margaritaville Resort Hotel. Recommended for approval. Number 3, an ordinance rezoning property at 6340 Riverview Avenue from R1 Single Family District to AG Agricultural District. Recommended for approval. Number 4, an ordinance rezoning property at 2508 North 12th Street and 1208 Cleveland Avenue from R2 Two-Family District to RP5 Planned Apartment District. Recommended for approval. Number 5, an ordinance rezoning property at 3542 North 51st Street from R1 Single Family District to AG Agricultural District. Recommended for approval. Number 6, an ordinance authorizing a special use permit at 527 Tenney Avenue for a short-term rental. Recommended for approval. Number 7, an ordinance authorizing a special use permit at 4610 Lloyd Street for a short-term rental. Recommended for approval. Number 8, an ordinance authorizing a special use permit at 2716 North 119th Street for a short-term rental. Recommended for approval. Number 9, an ordinance authorizing a special use permit at 1010 Miriam Lane for a used car dealership. Recommended for approval. Number 10, an ordinance authorizing a special use permit at 1945 West Lawrence Court for a short-term rental. Recommended for approval. And number 11, an ordinance authorizing a special use permit at 3716 Springfield Street for a short-term rental. Recommended for approval. Mayor, those are all the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you, clerk. Do any members of the commission, the county administrator, or the public wish to set aside any item on the planning and zoning consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the planning and zoning consent agenda will be voted on by one vote to follow the recommendation of the planning commission. I'll ask if anyone, again, is in attendance who would like to set aside an item. Seeing none, clerk, anyone joining us virtually who would like to set aside an item?
There are no hands raised.
I'll entertain a motion for approval of the planning and zoning consent.
Move to approve all items as submitted.
Johnson, second. There's a motion and a second. Clerk, roll call.
Markley?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
That's 6-0. The motion carries.
Thank you. Next is our planning and zoning non-consent agenda. Clerk, can you read the first item in its entirety?
Item number A1, special use permit application SP 2023-046, Aaron Lilly. Special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 4138 Lloyd Street. Recommended for approval for 1 year by a vote of 9-1.
Thank you. I'll ask staff to make some opening remarks. Mr. Hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Urban Design. This is a special use permit for a short-term rental. This is as a result of a change in ownership. This is in the Rosedale area plan. Staff receives no letters of support, no letters in opposition. There is a notice of violation on this property, but it relates to operating a short-term rental without a special use permit, which is why they are here tonight. Staff agrees with Planning Commission, recommends approval for 1 year with conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Hand. If the applicant is present, you're more than welcome to present your application.
We have the applicant online.
You can recognize.
Mr. Lilly, go ahead.
Yes, my name's Aaron Lilly. My address is 4138 Lloyd Street, Kansas City, Kansas, 66103. The request is for a special use permit to operate as a short-term rental.
Okay. I'll now open the public hearing. Clerk, have you received any notifications from the public who wish to express their comments in favor of the item?
No comments were received.
Clerk, is there anyone present in the audience who would like to speak in favor of the item? Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually?
No hands are raised.
Clerk, are there anyone that has sent you notifications who wish to express comments in opposition of the item?
No comments were received.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition to the item? Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who'd like to speak in opposition?
No hands are raised.
Thank you. Before I proceed, I've got a question from Commissioner Camille. Okay, public hearing is closed. Would the petitioner like to make any closing comments? Okay. Members of the commission, we're open for questions and we have Commissioner Material.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hand, during the time that this property was operating without a permit, were there any neighbor complaints about this property?
None.
Were there any calls for service at this address?
None.
Police, from the police? Were there any code violations documented by the NRC other than the one you previously mentioned?
No, sir.
Did anyone submit a letter of opposition to the Planning Commission regarding this property?
No, and nobody was in.
And no one
President
testified in
of
opposition at the Planning Commission meeting? Given the answers to those questions, I find no reason to overturn the Planning Commission decision, and I move to uphold the approval of the Planning Commission.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second for item -A1, special use permit 2023-046. Any further comments? Seeing none, clerk roll call.
Roll call. Markley?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Vote is 6-0. The motion carries.
Thank you. Clerk, it takes us to item A2. Clerk, can you read that in its entirety?
Item A2, SP 2023-048, Lance Pierce with Carrot Vacation Home Management. Special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 3925 Springfield Street. Recommended for approval for 1 year by a vote of 8-2.
Thank you, clerk. I'll ask Mr. Hand for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Urban Design. This is another special use permit for a short-term rental. This property is non-owner occupied. This is also in the Rosedale area. Staff received no letters of support, no letters in opposition. There are no notices of violation. This would be the first and only short-term rental on this block of Springfield. Staff agrees with Planning Commission, recommends approval for 1 year with conditions.
Thank you. I'll ask the applicant or representatives to present the application. Present online.
Mr. Pierce is online. Mr. Pierce?
Unmute. Yep, I'm here.
Go ahead.
My Lance Pierce. My address is 3917 Bell Street, Kansas City, Missouri, 64111. And we're applying for a short-term rental license.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing and ask the clerk if any notifications were received from those who wish to express their comments in favor of the item.
No comments were received.
Is there anyone present in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of the item? Seeing none. Clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who'd like to speak in favor of the item?
No hands are raised.
Clerk, have you received any notifications from the public who wish to express their comments in opposition to the item?
No comments were received.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this item? Seeing none. Clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who'd like to speak in opposition?
No hands are raised.
I will close the public hearing. Petitioner, would you like to make some closing comments?
Petitioner, go ahead, Mr. Pierce.
Nope, no closing comments.
Okay. Thank you. I will, we're going to open it up for the commission questions, and we have a question from Commissioner Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hand, I think I know, you know what questions I'm going to ask here. During the time that this property was operating without a permit, were there any neighbor complaints about this property?
None.
Were there any police calls for service at this address?
None, sir.
Were there any code violations documented by the NRC?
No.
And no one submitted a letter of opposition to the Planning Commission, and no one appeared to testify against in opposition at the Planning Commission meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Given the answers to those questions, I find no reason to overturn the Planning Commission decision, and I move to uphold the approval by the Planning Commission.
That's a second. Thank you, Commissioners. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? There's a motion and second to uphold the recommendation of the Planning Commission for item A2, special use permit 2023-048. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call. Markley?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
Townsend? Aye. McKiernan?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Vote is 6-0. The motion carries.
Clerk, that takes us to item A3. Can you read that one in its entirety?
A3, special use permit SP 2023-049, Lance Carrot with Carrot Vacation Home Management. Special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 4028 Booth Street. Recommended for approval for 1 year by a vote of 8-2.
Thank you. Mr. Hand, could you open up with remarks?
Yes, sir. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Urban Design. This is another special use permit for a short-term rental. It is also non-owner occupied. This is also in the Rosedale area plan. Staff has received no letters in support, no letters in opposition. There are some older notices of violation which were addressed through the rehab of this property for this in regards to this project. Staff agrees with the Planning Commission, recommends approval for 1 year with conditions. I would note there is one unpermitted short-term rental also on this block that will require enforcement action if the Board of Commissioners move forward with approval tonight.
Thank you. I'll ask the applicant or representative to make some present their application request.
My name's Lance Pierce, address 3917 Bell Street, Kansas City, Missouri. We are seeking a short-term rental license on this property.
Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing. Clerk, have you received any notifications from the public who wish to express their comments in favor of the item?
No comments were received.
Is there anyone present in the audience who'd like to speak in favor of this item? Clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who'd like to speak in favor of it?
No hands are raised.
Clerk, have you received any notifications from anyone who would like to express comments in opposition of the item?
No comments received.
Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in opposition of the item?
We do have a hand raised. Louise?
Hi,
Have
yes,
3 minutes.
thank you. I do have some questions and concerns as I hear all of these short-term rentals being approved. I'd
Ma'am, if
like to
you could
know,
state name and residency.
my name is Louise Lynch. I am a resident of Kansas City, Kansas, of the 3rd District. And I'd like to know, listening to all these short-term rentals, why the Pierce Group is going for a short term as opposed to a regular rental, being that we have such a shortage of housing problem in the KCK area. I hear all these short terms being approved and now 2 on 1 block. Most of the times these are going to be higher rentals because they're short term with less ability to enforce other, compliances and rules and regulations. Why are we doing so many of these? And I'd like to know why the group is not going for a long term to try and help out the housing shortage in this area. And I'd like the commissioners to be accountable for doing so many of these, as opposed to trying to help the housing situation for those residents that live here for a long term. Thank you.
Clerk, is there anyone else joining us virtually?
No other hands are raised.
Okay, I'll now close the public hearing. Petitioner, would you like to make some closing comments?
Mr. Pierce?
Would you like me to respond to that, or was that for the commissioners? We're following the rules that have been passed by the City Council of Kansas City, Kansas, and then seeking a license in accordance with those laws that were passed to operate a short-term rental in this property.
Okay. Do any members of the commission have any comments or questions? Commissioner McCarron?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hand, during the time that this property was operating without a permit, were there any neighbor complaints received about this property?
No, sir.
Were there any police calls for service documented at this address?
No, sir.
Other than, do I understand you to say that any code violations that may have been or are currently noted for this address have either been addressed or are being addressed currently?
Not in this particular case, but there is one later on.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone submit a letter of opposition to the Planning Commission for this application?
No.
Did anyone testify in opposition at the Planning Commission meeting for this application?
No.
Based on those answers, I find no reason to overturn the Planning Commission decision, and I move to uphold the approval by the Planning Commission.
Johnson, second.
Okay, I believe that there is a motion, correct? Commissioner McKiernan,
Yes, sir.
for item A3, special use permit 2023-049, and there is a second. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call. Markley?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye.
Townsend? Aye. McKiernan?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Vote is 6-0. The motion carries.
That takes them to item A4. Clerk, could you read that in its entirety?
Item A4, special use permit SP 2023-050, Lance Pierce with Carrot Vacation Home Management. Special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 4456 Springfield Street. Recommended for approval for 1 year by a vote of 8-2.
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Hand to make the opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Urban Design. Again, we have another special use permit for a short-term rental, also non-owner occupied, also in the Rosedale area plan. Staff has received no letters of support, no letters in opposition. There are some older notices of violation related to this property, but all have been addressed or rectified to date. Staff agrees with the Planning Commission's recommendation of 1 year with conditions.
Thank you. I'll now ask the applicant or representative to present the application request.
Mr. Pierce?
My name's Lance Pierce. I preside at 3917 Bell Street, Kansas City, Missouri, and we are seeking a short-term rental application at this property.
Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing and ask clerk if any notifications were received from those who wish to express their comments in favor of the item.
No comments were received.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of the item? Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who would like to speak in favor of the item?
No hands are raised.
Clerk, have you received any notifications from anyone expressing their comments in opposition of the item?
No comments received.
Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition to the item? Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who'd like to speak in opposition?
No hands are raised.
I will close the public hearing. Would the petitioner like to make any closing comments or remarks?
No remarks are needed.
Thank you. Do any members of the commission have any comments or questions? We have Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hand, during the time that this property was operating without a permit, were there any neighbor complaints received about this property?
No, sir.
Were there any calls for service for this property address?
No, sir.
Do I understand that all previous code violations have now been addressed?
That is correct.
Did anyone submit a letter of opposition to the planning commission?
No,
Did anyone testify in opposition at the planning commission meeting?
no.
Given the answers to those questions, I find no reason to overturn the planning commission decision. I move to uphold the approval of the planning commission.
We have a motion and a second, I believe. To uphold the planning commission's recommendation for approval for A4 special use permit 2023-050. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, the motion carries.
That takes us to item number A5. Clerk, can you read that in its entirety?
Item A5, special use permit SP 2023-052, Andrew Basilica, special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 2504 West 47th Avenue. Recommended for approval for 1 year by a vote of 9-1.
Thank you. Ms. Rand, you can make some opening comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Urban Design. This is another special use permit for a short-term rental. It's also non-owner occupied. It is also in the Rosedale area plan. Staff has received no letters in support, no letters in opposition. There was one member of the public in attendance at the Planning Commission hearing earlier this month that did speak in opposition to this case, although it was more in general to special use permits for short-term rentals. Excuse me. And there are no notices of violation on this property. Staff agrees with the Planning Commission's recommendation for approval for 1 year with conditions.
Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing. Clerk, have you seen any notifications from anyone who wishes to express their comments in favor of the item?
No comments were received.
Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in favor of the item? Seeing none, is there anyone joining us virtually? Clerk, would like to speak in favor of the item?
No hands are raised.
Clerk, have you received any notification from anyone who'd like to express their comments in opposition to the item?
No comments received.
Is there anyone who'd like to speak that is present in opposition to this item? Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who'd like to speak in opposition?
No hands are raised.
I'll close the public hearing. Petitioner, would you like to make some closing comments?
No closing comments. Thank you.
Okay. Members of the commission have questions? Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hand, during the time that this property was operating without a permit, were there any neighbor complaints received about this property?
None.
Were there any police calls for service documented at this address?
None.
Do I understand that all previous code violations have now been addressed?
Correct.
You said that no one submitted a letter of opposition to the planning commission and no one testified in opposition at the planning commission?
There was one member.
I'm sorry, there was one member who testified at the planning commission. I would just note that there was no one testifying in opposition tonight. Based on the answers to these questions, I find no reason to overturn the planning commission decision. I move to uphold the approval by the planning commission.
Johnson second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval of the planning commission's recommendation for approval of item A5 special use permit 2023-052. Sorry, 052. Are there any other comments from the commission? Seeing none, clerk roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, the motion carries.
That takes some time to make six. Clerk, could you read that in its entirety?
Item A6, special use permit SP 2023-054, Ashley Seville's. Special use permit to operate a short-term rental at 719 Lyon Avenue. Recommended for approval for 1 year by a vote of 9-1.
Thank you. We'll have Mr. Hand make some opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Design. This is a special use permit for a short-term rental. It is also not occupied. However, this one is in the central area plan. Staff received no letters of support, no letters in opposition. There are quite a few notices of violation as it relates to this property over the last couple of years, mostly in regards to maintenance, things like trash. Trash, and then older ones as it relates to boarded windows again, which would go to prior to the property being rehabbed. But the trash complaints are as soon as 2022 and 2023 to anticipate future questions from the commissioner. Staff does, however, agree with the planning commission's recommendation of approval for 1 year with conditions.
Thank you. I'll ask the applicant or representative to present the application request.
We do have the applicant online. You may go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ashley Civils. My address is 425 Washington Street, apartment 207 in Kansas City, Missouri, and I am asking for a special use permit for a short-term rental.
Thank you. I'll now open the public hearing. Clerk, have you received any notifications from the public who wish to express their comments in favor of the item?
No comments received.
Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in favor of the item? Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who'd like to speak in favor of it?
No hands are raised.
Clerk, have you received any notification from the public who wish to express opposition to the item?
No comments received.
Is there anyone present who'd like to speak in opposition to the item? Seeing none, clerk, is there anyone joining us virtually who'd like to speak in opposition to this item?
No hands are raised.
I will now close the public hearing. Would the petitioner like to make some closing comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, questions from the commissioner, commission or McKiernan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Sibbles, stand by. I will have a question for you in just a moment. Mr. Hand, during the time that this property was operating without a permit, were there any neighborhood complaints about this property?
None.
Were there any police calls for service at this address?
None.
Regarding the code violations, Ms. Sibbles, I'll ask you, when you acquired this property, was it vacant and unimproved?
No, I bought it after it was rehabbed.
You bought it after it was rehabbed, and what date was that?
In 2021,
Mr. Hand, how many code violations have we had since 2021 on this property?
2, one in 2022, one in 2023, both for trash not collected.
Ms. Sibbles, do you have procedures in place to ensure that your guests do not leave trash that violate code at this address?
yes, I do.
Will you be responsible for clearing said trash if said trash is ever found again at this address?
Yes, I will.
Yes, you will. Were there any other code violations other than these 2 documented, Mr. Hand?
No, all 2020 and before when it was a abandoned house.
Thank you. And no one submitted a letter of opposition to the planning commission?
No, sir.
And no one testified in opposition at the planning commission meeting?
Correct.
Ms. Sibbles, I cannot emphasize to you how important it is that short-term rental operators and guests be good neighbors to all around them. I can look at your property. It is in my district. It looks spectacular. We want to make sure that it continues to look spectacular and be an asset to the neighborhood so that this special use permit can be renewed and not revoked. All that being said, I find no
Commissioner,
basis. Yes, sir.
As a point of order, before you do that, I have a question.
Yes.
Mr. Hand, there were conditions. What were those conditions?
Standard conditions for all short-term rentals, as well as that they would have a maximum of 7 guests at any given time, 2 cars off streets, and that they would help us clear some of the alleyway. This location, and let me go back so you can kind of see it better. That's not gonna be, all right. So at this location, there is an alleyway that goes down the middle of the block, but because there's commercial purposes on uses on Cincinnati Avenue, it's an L alleyway. Probably was a T alleyway at some point. So you can only get to this property and the off-street parking because there is no driveway off Lyon Avenue from Broadview Avenue. And so we asked her to help us with the alleyway.
Okay, thank you.
We also have, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, real quick. We also had an open case with cops that we have opened the abutting property to the east is effectively using that L alleyway as their driveway, and there is an inoperable vehicle as well as an RV being stored right there. So we're trying to clear the alleyway so that there is now 2 points of access for all houses on that street, both sides of that street, Lyons and Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Hand. I'll now entertain a motion.
I move to uphold the approval by the planning commission.
Johnson second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson. Motion
Aye.
6-0, vote, the motion carries.
Thank you. I believe we're at B1. Or can you read that in its entirety?
Item B1, Plan Review Application PR 2023-014. Cody Busick with Vineyard Church of Piper. Preliminary Development Plan to expand an existing church at 10601 Hutton Road. Recommended for approval.
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Hanson to make an opening comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Design. This is a preliminary development plan for the expansion of a church and an expansion of their existing parking lot. This is in the Prairie Delaware Piper area plan. Staff's received no letters in support, no letters in opposition. There are no notices of violation. Staff does agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval. However, at the Planning Commission hearing, the applicant had asked for us to amend condition number 2 and condition number 8. Both of those changes required counsel with the county engineer, which we have done since the Planning Commission. We've come to an agreement with both the applicant, county engineer, and staff on amendments to condition number 2 and condition number 8. However, if we were to make a motion tonight to approve with those changed conditions, we would need 8 votes, and there are only 7 of you total here. So I've spoken with the applicant who is not here tonight, and he is open to a holdover for 30 days.
Okay, seeing as we don't have a quorum necessary to codify a vote, I believe a motion may be in order to hold it over.
Markley, move to hold this over for 30 days.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Clerk roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Voted 6-0, the motion carries.
Thank you. Takes us to C1. Clerk, can you read that in its entirety?
Item number C1, presentation of Plan KCK strategies. Update regarding Plan KCK strategies provided by Mr. Gunnar Hand.
Thank you, clerk. And I believe a representative from planning will present.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Alyssa Marcy, Long Range Planner. I am here to give you the second Plan KCK update. This specifically is going to cover the economic development strategic plan process so far. So I'm going to take you through the 3 steps that we have gone through so far. This first started off with how to develop a vision for community prosperity in KCK. You know, it's been important for us to figure out what that means to our community and what that looks like and how economic development is a tool to achieve that vision. So it started with the Vision Summit, which occurred in May. And we invited community members, we invited business owners, developers, and UG staff as well. So we had asked the attendees at this event to evaluate different economic futures. So the diagram here just shows those different scenarios. And what we wanted them to do is to challenge them to think about how different economic approaches might impact our future. And the results that we got were interesting. These 3 diagrams show 3 different futures. The first on the left-hand side is what is the least desired future for the community. The middle is what they expect to happen if we continue doing the exact same thing that we're doing right now. And then the right-hand side is what the preferred future might be. And the really interesting piece here is that if you look at that expected future, which basically what this diagram is showing you is that in that left-hand that left-hand side, you have a lot of expansion, westward expansion, you have a lot of market forces driving economic development. But then you look at the preferred future, and what you see is that our community would actually like something that's focusing more on concentrated development, on infill, on revitalizing our downtowns, our main streets, on something that's a little bit more intentional. So this is showing you that what we expect to happen is very different than what the community would prefer to happen. And I think the other interesting point too is that this shows that the community has an appetite for change. So from here, now that we had a better idea of what kind of preferred future the community wanted, our consultants held focus groups, and they also circulated a bilingual small business survey. And this is where things start to get a little bit more specific. So the focus groups were 6 different categories. So some of these categories are more subject topics, right? So for example, how do we grow and support our small businesses? That's one focus area. Another is industrial development, understanding that we have continued industry here, and that's a huge part of our economy. But then there's some more geographically tied focus areas. So for example, the Legends area and Quindaro Townsite. I think that's pretty evident from what we heard at the special session too, that there is a lot of interest in building up the Quindaro area. So our last event that was really heavily focused on economic development so far was the Community Prosperity Roundtable that was held about 2 weeks ago. And this was to try to tie in this desire, this desire that the community has for economic development that increases equity, that increases access to opportunity, and that really benefits everyone. So during this event, we reviewed the preliminary countywide market analysis, and that will be available at the end of September for you to read in full. But we also asked attendees to prioritize different actions as related to those 6 focus areas that I just mentioned. So just some overall highlights from that roundtable is there is overwhelming desire to support our small businesses. There's also a desire to rebuild our downtown KCK, but also the Legends area, but how to connect those 2 places, right? So that you can have access to that downtown easily and that you can have access to the west more easily. There's also a lot of interest in developing the riverfront, especially how we have all of these exciting projects coming, soon, like the Rock Island Bridge, Casey Mo's doing development, right? How do we really leverage that area? And then again, the Quindaro Townsite came up, and what is the role generally of cultural heritage and economic development at KCK? So lastly, we will have an opportunity to not only get more feedback about the economic development strategic plan, but all of the aspects of Plan KCK on October 28th, which is our neighborhood summit. There's also going to be a lot of other events that we're tying into that, so I encourage you to attend that as well. So I'll take any feedback, comments, questions, ideas.
Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thanks for all of the planning work that you and the team have done. I've attended quite a number of the sessions that you've held and appreciate the approach and the engagement of the community. It seems to be pretty vibrant, and I certainly will look forward to October 28th. And do I understand that once that takes place, then will we be looking to bring forward sort of a final product, if you will?
Yeah, so October 28th is sort of our big opportunity to give your final feedback on what we have. And then from there, that's where we need to really draft the document and hopefully present that to you later in the year.
Thank you. I just really appreciate all that you've done for it, because I know that you have a ton of other work to do and you're doing this along with it. So it's impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for this presentation, Ms. Marcy. Actually, Commissioner Bynum stole my question, so I have to think of a new question on the fly. But what do you envision the final plan to look like in terms of its content and then also how it's executed?
Sure. So we have, I think it's about 10 different chapters, like subject matter chapters, and I can get those to you as well. It's truly comprehensive in what it covers. And we hope to have that by the end of the year if it's adopted and everything goes as planned. Are you asking more so about like the physical deliverable or?
Well, you know, the thing that we continue to have conversation about, and I think it's important for our constituents to hear, is that this is not something that is going to just sit on a shelf. It is something that's going to live, breathe, be amended, be changed, grow, et cetera. So that's kind of along the lines of what I was asking the question for.
Understood. So we have worked really hard, I think, over the last 2 years to make sure that these are living documents and that we do have continuous conversations with community members about all of the very actionable steps that we list in these. I think with this particular document, we haven't formally decided what format it will be in, but we're hoping to have something that's also more interactive and publicly facing so that we can also show progress as it happens so people can see it and kind of, you know, live with it and play with it, and it's a little more tangible. I don't know if Director Hand has anything else to add to that, but.
Yeah, I would just say that all of our long range planning processes try to start implementation on day one. The act of planning is aligning our resources to optimize the outcome. So we are already pursuing things that we've been hearing. We are already integrating the things that the unified government and other stakeholders are doing. We are bringing them. I think the process itself acts as a platform to bring those voices together so they can then collaborate, engage, and work together moving forward. And so I think that what we're going to try to do, as Ms. Marcy noted, is we like to actually, we're pretty proud of the fact that we don't let the old adage live that plans sit on shelves and collect dust. We are actively implementing them. We have measures that we track on a quarterly basis to make sure we're maintaining progress. But I think the most important thing to understand here is this community has never had a long-term comprehensive plan like this. They have never had a visionary document like this. It's a really interesting opportunity to have these conversations. I think it's a reason why we've been had so engagement. I don't think that, at least in the records that we've reviewed in past planning documents, I don't think we've ever had the type of engagement, the different methodologies of engagement, or the intensity of those we engaged like we have through this process. And so we are very heartened that we're growing buy-in every day in the process, and thereby we hope that allows not only staff, but our constituents to hold us and you accountable to its implementation.
Okay, thank you. And I think, you know, and I see Mr. Kendall has his hand up. I'll ask him to come up, be ready to speak to this, if you don't mind, Kendall. But the question I was going to ask you, we talked about this, I think last year, that we have so many plans right now. And will this be integrated with all of the other plans as it relates to economic development strategies?
So globally, this represents sort of the umbrella document where we provide sort of the global direction, those North Stars, the big picture of what we as a collective community is trying to move forward. We get into the detail of the area plans. And so a big part of this plan is going to define what area plans we should do next, because there is an order and there are a lot of areas that do not have area plans. So this is really the first move to restructure how we do long range planning in the community. And to your point, though, I think that we mentioned this last month in our update, but with some serendipity, there were a lot of plans in place moving forward that were all having the same conversation about our collective future. And so we merged them all together into one plan KCK effort. It's been a lot of work, but I think that it's starting to materialize. I think what's really important to understand here is we've been hearing a lot of stuff. We've been collecting a lot of data. We started to synthesize that data. And so what you see here is some of the insights of what we've been hearing and what our consultants and experts and staff see as opportunities. We haven't written anything. Right? The plan is not set. There is no future. We really need you guys to help direct if you see gaps, opportunities, things we're missing, or specific initiatives that you think are important that may be overlooked and thus far. And so that's kind of really what these monthly updates are trying to do. So make sure that we're building into that approval process later this fall and winter. And so, to your specific question, we've never had an economic development strategy. It will be integrated as a part of a larger vision. Right. I think that is a nuance, perhaps, if you're not an esoteric planner like myself, but it's really important to understand that it's not its own thing on an island. It is its own deliverable in collaboration with all the other things that are required for economic development, be it land use, transportation, and that. And so one quick thing I just wanted to add is there's some big ideas, right? There's some new ideas I think that are emerging. But one of the consistencies we hear through the Plan KCK is very similar to one of the things we heard when we were doing the GODOT countywide mobility strategy. And then if you remember, there were some big crazy ideas in GODOT, but there was also one of the core strategies was get back to the basics, right? Road, curb, median with a tree, sidewalk. Very similar. A lot of the feedback from staff as well as our constituents is they just want us to do basic services better.
Right. I agree. I'm not gonna belabor time. I will ask one last question. With regards to the small business portion that I saw on the screen, Ms. Sharon Reed has put together the small business kind of platform, I suppose. And is that being discussed within the concept of solutions for small business?
Yeah, you're talking about the new platform that they
Yes.
developed? Yes.
Okay, great. Mayor, with your approval, can we ask Mr. Kendall, he had his hand raised to come have words.
Is that okay? Greg Kendall, President of the Wyandotte Economic Development Council and a resident here of Kansas City, Kansas. Thank you for just a couple minutes. I haven't been participating in these conversations on a monthly update. In some ways, I feel like I maybe should have been. I did not want to get to the end of this entire process and not at least give you some thoughts that at this stage of the process. Number one, I appreciate the team that you all have assigned to work on this and the time that it's taken to do this. I commend them a great deal. So I don't want to take any of the comments that I may make here to be a personal affront to them because they've done a lot of hard work. My concern, and this is not going to be surprising to the board members, the mayor sits on our board, as does Commissioner Burrows. I brought this to the attention of our investors and our board members at our last board meeting to say that my team and I largely have participated in every single Plan KCK focus group. Some of them at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, followed by a 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. Unusual times to have planning focus meetings, all online. And usually the folks who participate in these kinds of things do tend to be more activist oriented. There's a very particular reason that they want to participate in those very specific subjects that were highlighted during those focus groups. And I get that. The part that concerns me probably the most about how this has been put together is that the Foursquare that you saw on there is the same Foursquare that has been presented at every single focus group, which largely puts a 15-minute city, the branded piece of it sounds pretty cool already right out of the gate, up in the right-hand corner, and all the rest are not. In fact, the one area that is being demonized is the sprawling into the future, which is apparently where everything that we have been doing for the last 10 or 15 years is now located. That's where the market is. So if we have intentional marking up in the right-hand corner, and that is completely opposite of where the market is, my only comment to you all as you all look at a final plan down the line, and the same thing I have said to Future IQ and to the team,
1 minute remaining.
is that you cannot have intentional investment. You cannot have economic development in this community without the market. You have to have product. You have to have the availability of incentives and dollars to move that forward. Because if you leave the market behind, intentional investment means public money. And to my last knowledge, we were struggling a little bit with additional public money. So as we move through this process, my one caution is do not frighten off the market that has been providing economic development and investment in this community to the tune of about $6 billion over the last 10 years by developing a plan that is not marketable. And so there can be some great ideas and it can be a great North Star, but I just want to be cautionary that we also have to be pragmatic, that if you want development to continue in this community, in all parts of the community and across all different sectors, there has to be a balance. And so finding a way to come more to that middle area is going to be important. And so I just encourage you all to be thoughtful that we don't want to alienate the very folks who've been investing in this community for some time for a North Star that may not have investors today. I just want to put that caution out there. I've been critical of Future IQ, frankly, that we have not been engaged really at all. We participated like every other resident, and only until tomorrow are we actually being invited to participate in some conversations with them. And that's been frustrating to me, that we've not been invited to participate at all as a team with Future IQ. So I just want to put that out there, that we've been treated no differently than any other resident. Maybe that's the way it was designed, but we thought that as a partner to the unified government, we would have been invited a long time ago to participate. Just wanted to put that out there. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the comments from staff and stakeholders. Any further comments? Seeing none. That ends the planning and zoning portion of the meeting. We will now move to the regular portion of our agenda, which takes us to the mayor's agenda. Clerk, there are 3 items there. If you could just briefly describe those, I think that will suffice.
Yes, Mayor, we have 3 proclamations. The first one is now therefore I, Tyrone Garner, Mayor, CEO of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, do hereby proclaim August 27th, 2023 as Oak Ridge Missionary Church Day in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, and urge all citizens to recognize Oak Ridge Missionary Church Day. Proclamation. Now therefore I, Tyrone Garner, Mayor, CEO of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, do hereby proclaim August 31st, 2023 as Sexual Harassment and Sexual Assault Awareness Day in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, and urge all citizens to recognize Sexual Harassment and Sexual Assault Awareness Day. Proclamation. Now therefore I, Tyrone Garner, Mayor, CEO of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the 4th Saturday of August 2023 as Charlie Yardbird Parker Day in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, and call upon all residents to recognize Charlie Yardbird Parker Day in Kansas City. Mayor, those are all the proclamations.
Thank you. That takes us to our regular consent agenda. Do any members of the commission or county administrator wish to set aside any item on the regular consent agenda? If item is not set aside, all items on the regular consent agenda will be voted on by 1 vote. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve all items as submitted.
There's a motion to
Johnson,
approve.
second.
There's a second to approve. Any discussion? Clerk, roll call.
Roll call. Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows. Townsend. Aye. McKiernan.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
The vote is 6-0. The motion carries.
Thank you. Give me a second. All right, that takes us to the administrator's agenda. And item number 1 on that agenda is the transfer of ownership of Juniper Gardens. We have it's a resolution authorizing the transfer of the title of Juniper Gardens to the Kansas City, Kansas Housing Authority to clear the title for sale. I'll ask the representative from our legal department to make some remarks. I believe we have at the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioner, County Administrators. County Administrator, what we are here tonight for is the resolution in front of you, which would just authorize our County Administrator to sign a deed transferring title to the properties located off 1926 North First Street, 1803 North Third Street, and 101 Walker Avenue, which we all know as Juniper Gardens, to the ownership of the Kansas City, Kansas Housing Authority. that's been operating those properties since the early 1960s. This is so that they can in turn then sell the property themselves. And it was through this the title search that they were doing in the sale process that they realized that the city still had ownership of the property, or at least the title was in their name. I think it could be argued that they've had constructive ownership for quite a while and have been maintaining these properties. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay. The administrator would like to add comments.
And once this was brought to our attention, we were like, well, we own subdivisions. And as we looked into it after it was brought to our attention by the Housing Authority, our attorney, Ms. Green, really articulated kind of a brief Cliff Note history of these properties in well before the unified government was formed through the merger. Kansas City, Kansas, the city acquired property for special purposes, in this case, to provide housing to our low income. At that time, we had an entity, the Housing Authority, that provided that service, and which was, it appears to have been a practice in the 60s. We'd acquire the property, they would build on the property, manage it, and provide services to their residents. We have a number of these properties. Still, you'll be hearing more and more about requests for transfers to make it neater. In the discussion with the executive director and the board chair, which you'll have an opportunity to hear in just a minute, I'll tell you, it was an eye opener of the services that they provide their clients. And I think it's the expectations of types of services that most of you who have talked to me expect in dealing with low-income residents. It's actually helping them improve their lives, get skills to be able to gain an income that opens more doors for them, provides better healthcare and other amenities into their life. As we were talking also, though, I'm impressed at the land bank, or that's the land bank. I am impressed with our land bank, but for our, want to discount them, with our housing authority, because they're also thinking outside the box. I think you'll hear today, one of the options that they're investigating is creating a community development corporation, which uses public funds that they've identified to leverage private investment to continue their mission of providing affordable housing to our impoverished population. And it was that discussion and kind of a strong encouragement, which you'll hear them, is that in exchange for this property, you will move toward those types of models. We don't have them existing in very active ways in our community, but I've seen them in other cities. They do a wonderful job leveraging the private financial community to provide important public needs services into our community via housing development. So to keep me from continuing to talk, if I could invite our friends from the Housing Authority to talk about this proposal, that'd be great. Also, they have agreed, I know it's been a desire of the commission, is to get the two boards together, our commission and their board, and really have a discussion of what they actually do. I think we see towers, we see neighborhoods and that's probably about the experience a lot of us have, but they're doing some really interesting work. So introduce yourself, please.
My name is Andrea Tapia. I'm the Executive Director for the Kansas City, Kansas Housing Authority. I reside in Kansas City, Kansas. I want to thank the commissioners for this opportunity, the mayor for this opportunity, and the city administrator as well, or county administrator as well.
We work hard as a housing agency to ensure that we provide affordable housing for those in need. But we also understand that housing isn't the end all. We understand that once you house individuals, there are other needs that are needed. We do reach out to other organizations to help fill those gaps. And we do rely on the unified government to help with that as well. We do provide different services at the Housing Authority. We do have a family self-sufficiency program as well as a ROS program and other programs that we provide individuals who receive program subsidy through our agency. And I would love to sit down with the commissioners and go over those services, because sometimes I think that individuals think that the Housing Authority, all we do is housing only, but we know that there are other needs for the people that we serve. We are asking right now for the commissioners to allow the transfer of the land to the Housing Authority so that we can move forward with the sale of Juniper Garden. We have spoken to the unified government before about this process when this came up as an issue for the Housing Authority, and we did ask for support from the unified government. And I would like to read a letter that was submitted to the Housing Authority on August 11th, 2020 from the unified government. And it comes from Mr. David Alvey, the mayor and CEO. And it says, "Dear Mr. Scott, in response to your request for support for the disposition of Juniper Gardens, I would like to pledge the full support of the unified government. I am aware of the efforts made by the Housing Authority in the past to revitalize Juniper Gardens, with numerous attempts that included funding from both Hope 6 applications and several Choice Neighborhood Grant applications. Many of these were supported by the unified government, and a few were in partnership with the unified government. Juniper Gardens, as the oldest and largest public housing development in the state of Kansas, has a long history, making this decision a hard one. We understand that due to the age of the property and lack of services available to the residents, it is no longer a desirable site for housing. We must support the Housing Authority's decision to dispose of this property and to assist the residents in relocation, and look forward to the ability to revitalize this area in a new way to enhance the economic viability of Northeast Kansas City, Kansas. The unified government pledges its support of the disposition of Juniper Gardens and looks forward to discussing ways we can assist in this endeavor." And we are asking that the unified government uphold this support for the Kansas City, Kansas Housing Authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff and stakeholders. Any commissioner have any comments or questions? Commissioner Townsite.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Ms. Tappy. Good to see you, and thank you, Councilor Green and Mr. Matt. The only question I have right now is, and I do recall the letter, the period of time from Mayor Alvey, and this coming before the board. With regard to the 3 addresses, what is the status of occupancy with those and relocation of any tenants?
Currently, we have 34 households that are still at Juniper Gardens. Many of them have housing choice vouchers so that they can seek out housing outside of the property, and that is by choice for the tenants. They have chosen, they had a choice, they can transfer onto property or receive a housing choice voucher. So some have chosen to move off property, some have chosen to port to other areas. Also, what was that? I'm sorry, on the second question.
I think you encompassed it with
Okay.
yours. So there are 34 still in residency there?
Yes.
Okay, is there some type of deadline by which those residents have to make a decision? And the action we take tonight will not preempt any time they may have been given, will it?
No, we are allowing them the time that they need to relocate. And we do have a relocation consultant that's been working with the residents to help them find housing. To also their security deposits are paid, their moving expenses are covered. We are doing everything that we can to ensure that we're not creating the burden for those who are relocating.
Are they restricted in the use of those vouchers only to Wyandotte County?
They are not, no.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't see any other questions. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve as submitted. Johnson second.
Second,
Okay, I have a motion and a second for approval. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Townsend,
aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, the motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes the portion of our regular meeting, and I join us in that capacity. I will entertain a motion to adjourn officially as the Board of Commission and to call us back to order as the Land Bank Board of Trustees.
Move to adjourn and reconvene.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, the motion carries.
Thank you. Do any members of the Commissioner or County Administrator wish to set aside any items on the Land Bank consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve all items as submitted.
Johnson second.
There is a motion and a second. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, the motion carries.
Thank you. There are no further items for us to take up tonight, and so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Johnson.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. Clerk, roll call.
Roll call, Markley,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0,